You're of course the master of balance, and you are kind of responsible for the balance patches. Everybody knows that.
Except the moon one.
Of course, that was grubby. We all know that. But you're also a stats guy, so maybe you can update us on the stats, and we established a kind of floor about what we're talking when we give our thoughts on possible and necessary changes.
Yeah, so I mean, this has always been like a discussion, right? We talked, you talked a bit about Grubby when he showed that he had this video about balance in Warcraft historically that it's never been as good as it is now, and we did some talks on like the limitations of looking at ladder data. If you just look at ladder data without doing any things with it, and the way I usually have tried to look at like how balance is fluctuating is to look at the ladder data, but trying to compensate for the so-called expected win rate, like how an MMR player of a certain MMR would be expected to win against a higher MMR player, and then look at how that actually like unfolds, and you basically put all these numbers together. There's a lot of limitations to this as well, so it's basically just to give you like, does these numbers confirm our initial suspicions, right? So if you think you're fully convinced that matchup orc versus human is completely biased in one direction, the numbers should at least like be somewhat in that direction. If they're not at all, then you probably should like think more about why that is. And of course, you also use like tournaments. Tournaments you have to use what we call the eye test, right? So it's not like no one can actually say, as you called me, the balance master, but you can do like as much as you can. Duel it out in the information wars, I guess is the way to put it.
So do we have any stats to present, or stats that
have I shared this new one with you? Expected average win rate.
You 3.0? Shared something at some point. I think you said it's a very...
Pop it on screen.
Yes, please. Let me pop it.
Can I send it to your email maybe? I guess that's fine.
To my email?
I was like, had this link here. Sorry. As you guys can see, super well prepared here.
Yeah.
I think this should be it.
Do I have access? I of course have access. There we go. Oh yeah, you did share that at some point.
Yeah. So I just updated like until 2 weeks ago with all the ladder games basically.
Yeah, I think we also established this kind of way of looking at stats in the previous patch iterations. So let's maybe skip what it is, and maybe you can break it down briefly.
And also for those that asking, I have no affiliation with Blizzard, or I'm actually no way informed any official guy. I'm just one of those that are interested in this stuff.
Are you sure?
Have been part in discussions. It was funny. Yeah, the main story I guess for that is when at the last Rara, Lowlight asked me to talk with Moon regarding stuff. And then Moon thought I was an official Blizzard employee after. So the company didn't even listen to me. It said like a sad voice in the YouTube video after. So
yeah, I guess that's quite an insult, but you never know.
Yeah. Depends on the year. He thought I was employed, I guess. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if you need to read all the disclaimers and stuff. I don't think my numbers, with one exception, are is like that surprising to people that follow, especially the top scene. But we'll see.
Yeah, you have to guide me a little bit where I have to go.
I mean, there's a lot of ways you can try to break down the numbers, right? Usually, people aren't with looking at balance or like how it affects the top percentage of players. Because then you can expect that on average people are using like all their tools at their disposal. That's not saying that we shouldn't like have any attempts to make it so that the game is fairly balanced overall. It's horrible if like every player at 15 MMR have no chance in a certain matchup, right? Even though it is like theoretically balanced at the top level. But so that's like the tricky part. But in general, we try to balance. Like I think every game developer more or less really try to balance the top level. So the tournaments end up like with a balanced state, in a way to put that. And so I guess the way I think that the MMR cutoff range that I think is mostly useful for looking at like the top players is the average 2300 MMR, the tab down on your screen somewhere.
Yep.
And that is basically you take every game that has an average MMR between the two players of at least 2,300. So you only look at those games. And I take out every game that a player is random. That's might be a bit extreme. Some people think that, but it's kind of hard because so many random games are decided just by build order wins and stuff, right? Because in some maps, especially, it can be just a huge advantage. You didn't see that tournament, I think. No, of course, because this was beta streaming. But when Happy lost against Starbucks Night Elf.
Yeah, I saw that. I mean,
Happy went Lich first against like a keeper on a bad map for that, and
he also, what was it? He
went for a ghoul pull.
Ghoul pull versus exactly. Like, yep, we should probably not take that like too seriously.
Yeah, and then of course I remove mirrors because mirrors don't mind her. Though it is interesting to actually look at how players are good in mirrors and stuff. And as said, there's a lot of caveats here. I know that certain players at the top level leave certain games, so their MMRs are maybe not completely realistic. Happy leaves against Blade and some other people. 1-0 is probably not as serious on ladder as it should be. Stuff like that, right? So it's not meant as like a definite proof on how it is. It's just to give a direction, and then we'll use our logic and the people's court to decide if that's like true or not, right?
Yeah.
So we can do, and I would say like there's actually no like truth to what a good and bad number here is. I would say the numbers can fluctuate quite a bit just by like certain players playing more or less and stuff like that. So I have just like set a 2-point percentage. It's like any meaningful deviation, but there's no actual truth to if 2% is like a lot and isn't something and 4% is a lot bigger. It's kind of what you feel should be like correct, right? I see that when other people mention battle stuff and say like 45, 55, 60, 40, right? And stuff like that. That would be like a 20% difference, right? So that's huge, I would say. But for them, they're not like, that's not that big. So just like keep that in mind as well. And of course, this shows that like you're still supposed to win quite often. You're not supposed to lose every game. So it's always opportunities within this, right? The thing I would say, like from the data you see, is the one matchup I think everyone's going to react. We'll do that first. Because there's one matchup I think everyone, and also Blizzard seems to agree, is favored in one direction, which doesn't show up in the ladder data. And that is the human versus undead matchup.
It seems perfectly balanced, Dondo. What are you talking about?
It's perfectly balanced at the top.
0.4. It's nothing. Yeah.
If you look at the slightly lower MR brackets of 2000, then it changes. Then human is favored. And I actually do think human remains favored at the top level. But at this level especially, there's two factors that really affect it. Is that Happy on ladder against human is still pretty insane. He has like a win rate of 94%, a lot higher than it does in tournaments. So it's kind of hard to know like if that's like a true reality or if that's a lot like made by 40 maybe playing worse on ladder than it does in tournaments and stuff. And also 1-0 being a slightly lower MMR than it should be also actually colors these data. There's not that many human undeads on the top 2,300 MMR. It's the two least represented races on the top level. So that's maybe a thing. But it's kind of hard to know for certain why this data doesn't like match up with the tournament data at all. Because I feel like most players would agree that, or at least even if the games throughout are not completely imbalanced, there are moments in each game where human feels a lot stronger than undead. That would be maybe the early game, level 3 AM. And yeah, so, but that's the one like thing I'm kind of struggling a bit to like decide why it's so weird on the ladder data compared to everything else.
Yeah, I also feel like the tournament results come and go in waves. Like there's 2 weeks where human seems unbeatable, and then let's say Happy finds a solution, and there's 2 weeks of him crushing the human again, and it's in a constant flux kind of. And 1-0 obviously still for some reason boycotting Banshees. You can't really take that seriously either, because he's just refusing to build that one unit, which seems to be the strongest against that race. So that's where we have to interpret the data and not just go blindly by data.
Yeah. And like I feel like the Happy Fortitude series are often quite interesting because they always end up like 4-0, 4-1.
Yeah.
Like one of their directions. It seems like it's very like they based on the form of the day at some point. But yeah, we can go from the top, just to like go everything. Data suggests that human Night Elf is fairly even. If anything, maybe Night Elf wins slightly above expectation, but you also got to keep in mind here that human has pretty high MMR on average now these days, because Humba.
Because Pella Rifle.
With Pella Rifle. Also because Night Elf's got... I feel like if you can just look at that, the average MMR Night Elves has gone down, and the top Night Elves are less active these days. Kao plays less, Moon plays a bit less. So it might also just be a result of the expected winner of Night Elf being a bit artificially low, maybe dragged down a lot by the Undead matchup, would be my idea, but we'll see. But I think that matchup from the tournament results is also in a pretty good state, right? There is a series switch all the time. It looks like if Human plays a perfect game, he will win. If the Night Elf play a perfect game, they probably will win. Like, it feels pretty fair in that state. So I think like this matchup is for first time in quite a long time is fairly well balanced. Actually, like a lot of the Night Elves, I mean, Lolite is the known case. I talked to a lot of Night Elves and a lot of pro players in general in this, like, before this PTR cycle, basically, to get suggestions for a community, like balance suggestions. And a lot of the Night Elves feel like Human is the second hardest matchup, like quite like a big degree, and feel like Human has a big advantage in the matchup. I think it's map dependent also to a certain extent. But yeah, it's I think that matchup is in a pretty good state now. It might even have room for like some improvements to Night Elf without actually doing that much of the overall balance of that matchup. Would be my interpretation at least. Human Orc is in the data suggests slightly Orc favored. You can say the human players always complain, but it's also the matchup that the human players complain about the most by far. It seems to also be like tournament results are slightly skewed towards Orc, I would say. It is the race I think Fortitude is by far the most scared of meeting in any tournament now. Maybe even more than... I feel like Fortitude is more scared of meeting Lynn than he is actually meeting Happy.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is an insane thing to say, I feel, but I do think that's like the case. There was like... Human Orc has gone through like these waves where the fast expo meta becomes super common, then you kind of saw the movement towards the other way, but now Orc has kind of figured that out again. And on the one base versus one base, I think the matchup is mostly colored by Orc is a little bit more forgiving than Human. With the Farseer Headhunter pressure especially, if you do like a tiny bit too much damage to the Archmage or you lose the Footmirror too much, then you can it just has a tendency to snowball from there. And also I think Headhunters quite often give the TC level 3 before the Human has a chance to get level 2. And level 3 on his second hero as well. It's like the two break points in that matchup. So I would say slightly Orc favored. Not like horrible by any degree, but slightly Orc favored.
Yeah, I feel like this matchup was impacted a lot by the last patch half a year ago, with Human early game, of course, being a lot more stable and Headhunters being more valuable again. This matchup benefited a lot from these changes without being completely crooked on one side.
Yep. And also, like, so stuff like Arcane Tower first came in very strong, made it, and like, but Orcs have become better at adapting, not moving that hero that much into range, stuff like that, like, has that, like, jump back to perfect balance has jumped more back towards slight Orc, like, favor, I would say. Human Undead, we already been through. Weird matchup on data. I would say Human is in general, I would say, like, at least favored, maybe strongly favored. So this is the one point where like I disagree with my own data. I just do. I don't think this is true. From my own experience, and this is of course 1950 to 2050 these days. Again, Humba. I would say I probably have like a 90% win rate against Undead.
That's pretty sick.
I think especially at that like 2000-ish MMR range, I think Human just has a lot easier to job than Undead, because it's so easy to kill one more ghoul, get level 3 AM, and just cancel that expo forever.
Yeah.
So yeah. And Night Elf Orc. By the data, it's like the most perfectly balanced matchup in the pool, which is also a bit surprising to say. I do think we see that on tournaments as well, but maybe orcs win more than elves in tournaments, right? I think that would be from what I can tell from the matchups recently.
I would agree, yes.
The elves really are not happy. I mean, elves are in general pretty miserable these days, it's like the feedback. And I think the reason they don't like this matchup specifically is a lot to do with, it's like two main points they really mislike. It's the mirror image cooldown. It's like one thing. And the fact that they feel like they don't have like a staple strategy they can go for.
Yeah,
Night Elf Orc, for all Night Elf Orc imbalance in the earlier days when Night Elf used to have a big advantage, at least you kind of knew what the strategies were on both sides and what they had to do.
Mm-hmm. There was mostly Talons was super straightforward, and Mass Tier 1 was super straightforward, or of course the age-old cookie cutter of Dryad Bears was also super straightforward.
Yeah, but now I feel the feedback I got is like Night Elf feels like in a series they have to do one strategy per map. So they win by not the orc like trying to make the orc not react correctly. More the fact that like the strength of the matchup is like in that way. But I think there's certain elements you could tweak in this matchup as well, with like making the game curve a bit smoother, without being like bad for balance. Because the one thing I feel in the matchup, which I think we've really seen lately, is if the orc, it's always kind of been like this, but now especially, if orc gets like the level 5/5, Blade Master or Shadow Hunter, they have to be absurdly far behind to not win the game.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
It's not necessarily a bad thing to have a breaking point in a matchup, but that is a crazy power spike.
Yeah,
it's a spiky spike.
Breaking points should be like breaking points, but not like unsurmountable breaking points.
Yes, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So even matchup, but maybe could look at some tweaks in some certain moments. And I think like the matchup is at least stable enough that maybe a general like thing buff towards elf, we can get back to some other day, might be like wouldn't be hurtful, right? But for 2 years ago, saying like any buff to elf in another matchup would make it very hard for the elf orc matchup. If it was like a general buff to elf, right? I think that's like a thing to keep in mind. And then we have the troubled child of Warcraft. It's kind of been like that for how many years do you think, Neo, now?
As long as I can remember, dude.
5, 6?
As long as I can remember. Yeah.
It's elf versus undead. I mean, elf versus undead was undead favored before the Moonwell nerf.
Yeah.
Undead,
I'm thinking back to like 2018 or something.
Yeah, I'm just like saying for the state how it is now. So elf undead remained undead favored throughout the thickest emulation values, like at those 2 months before they fixed it a bit, and then they did another patch. And then, so the only things that have changed meaningfully in that matchup since then is making Moonwells weaker. So that matchup is like, it's just as bad as ever, maybe worse, what I would say, on the top level. And like, I feel like of course, Happy is Happy, he wins everyone. But there's nothing more hopeless than Happy, or 1-0 actually, against the elf on top level.
Yeah.
I think that matchup is just the elf players have at least given up. It's like feedback.
Understandably, I guess. I mean, we talk about this for such a long time. I don't even know if we have to explain this a lot more. We talked about this in the last patch discussion. We talk about this on pretty much every stream. Yeah, we agree. This has to change, and I think we all hate the timing because it's so binary. It's not even binary. It's like, it's not the you win or you lose, but it's you win now or you win later.
Yeah.
With a 9-minute push.
And I think, I remember I talked a lot with Dice about this at last Rara, and I think that's like a good approximation as well. It's kind of the fact that it's so many unforgiving moments for an Night Elf, and sooner or later it will break usually, right? So you do have a possibility of a composition at one base versus one base where you have the perfect like Night Elf, Bear, Dryad, Talons, decent hero levels against one base, you can hold and win, right? We have seen some maps of that, but there's so small like margins of error until we get to that point.
Yeah.
That it becomes over time impossible to win in a series against like the best players. Happy 1-0, even Labyrinth has like a far higher win rate in that matchup than anyone else. So yeah, so that is a remaining issue. I would say the thing that has changed a bit maybe, and I think this will be hard for a lot of people's perception because this historically used to be so the other way around for quite a while, is that Undeads are also doing very well against Orc.
Yeah.
On the top level.
And oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Explain.
you first. You go. Go ahead, Neo.
I think, no, I kind of want to jump down to a specific thing that needs to be nerfed, but you explain more about this. I think it's better thematically.
I mean, there's like two. Night Elf versus Undead and Orc versus Undead has like two similarities currently. It's the fact that, again, I think this is very different on the higher level than on the lower level, right? Because on the higher level, Undead gets to creep to level 3. And I think that dynamic is a bit different on lower armor levels because you need to make sure you don't pick up enough, you don't loosen too many ghouls, stuff like that. Also, the Wyvern play, I think, is harder to counter than execute on lower MMR's levels. So I think that's very strong on like the Orc side. Until you get to like the happy 1-0 Labyrinth that do have the control to just get it into late game and then win by hero levels. But Night of Undead has Night of Undead and Orc Undead has like that's kind of two same things that happen. Undead usually gets level 3 without the other hero leveling equally, or at a Night of cases sometimes equally, but pretty rare. And then the Undead runs on the map, maybe picks up some units, just harasses the elf so the other hero doesn't get them much level. And then there's a time, the magical frenzy push timing, where in the Night Elf case, the frenzy push usually goes for the kill, or at least gives you an advantage to that first push. For the Orc case, you either push and win, or you do as you saw in the Lin series now against Happy, which Happy has figured out. Since you can't go out on the map during this time, I'll just expand to
on maps where this is possible, of course.
Where maps this is possible. And of course you have the alternative playstyle where that difference is not that important in the Orc, whether the Orc goes Wyvern, but I feel like when you see at the top level, I don't think anyone disagrees that Focus is a worse player than Happy. But even considering Happy would be like 50% better than Focus, which is a big difference. One of those 35 series he has lost in a row now should have been the other way just by chance, I think.
1-35, dude.
Yeah. So that strategy doesn't quite work well enough on that level. It just becomes a point where the Wyverns become so weak against the Alchemist Nova nuke, basically, that they stop being effective at all.
And Bad Riders as well.
Yeah, and Bad Riders as well, when your armor upgrades, yeah.
Yeah.
So like the Orc Undead being statistically being close to as bad as Night Elf against Undead is a kind of a new thing. It is also of course before, and I do get why people get annoyed by this. It is of course also, and all balanced talk in this top level it's a part of a Happy problem, and they're trying to decipher whether Happy is just so much better than others is like an impossible question to answer. But I do think described to like my idea to think about this is that let's say Happy is like the best player of a sport of his generation, right? Take like a sport where there's fair few winners, take tennis or something. And let's say it was only Federer and ignore the other guys. Even in those sports, those guys, they win like 80% of all Masters, right? The big tournaments, they're like the top 4. But they also do lose in the first round sometimes. And that never happens with Happy. And I would say it also almost never happens 1-0 against Elf. Never, more or less. And very rarely against Orc. 1-0 loses against Human and Happy, basically. It's like how it works. So there is some issues at the top level in these two matchups as well. People have already figured there's a puzzle here. Human Undead is human favored, And the two other matchups Undead is probably a bit Undead favored. Or is Undead favored. It's like the way I would interpret the data and from what I see from tournament results. So that's like the puzzle we're trying to solve. And I think that's like the interesting part of these suggestions that Blizzard has revealed now, is that they kind of now are going hard to fix the one matchup Undead is struggling a bit in and not touching the other ones, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a secret that Night Elf Undead and Orc Undead, they both benefit so much from the Frenzy Ghoul timing that this is the most obvious thing to address.
Yeah.
And this also wouldn't hurt Human vs. Undead in a big way, I think.
I think it would hurt it more if there was still that timer, of course, if Undead went for one base pushes, right?
Yeah.
Then it would be a bit more difficult. But Human Undead now is so much about the early game before Frenzy, and then after that it's about Banshees or tanks for Human.
Yeah.
We'll see if that keeps on being a thing or not, depending on PTR changes. And or Banshees versus like Human has to do a lot of, I would say, trickery or like movement on the map, get positions. It's still an open question to me what the Human Undead late game with Banshees is for like a pure army counter measure. Because we don't see that anymore, I feel. Undead, the humans on the top level go tanks. Because I don't think they feel like they can fight Banshees straight up.
Yeah.
The only exception, I guess, is Sox trying to go for rifles sometimes, where Banshees will be slightly less effective, of course. Yeah.
But we haven't seen that being successful either. I mean, the War 3 Champions Finals clear 4-0 was also not his best performance, of course, but also not the greatest advertisement for this strategy.
No, I agree. I mean, the strategy felt a bit half-baked in general. I think, I mean, the thing Sock does less well than Fortitude in that matchup is that Fortitude just has better movement on the map to get that first cancel on the gold mine. He just moves better and more effectively, and Sock going like gung-ho with AM 200 meters in front of the rest of the army, getting Nova every time was a sight to behold for sure.
All right, so I don't know how far you want to take it today, because we will have another talk on Monday with SaveOrcas and the community balance patch proposal, I guess. But is there a clear take?
I mean, there's some clear goals and stuff, but we can't do that on Monday. What we could do if the PTR, like, have you talked too much about that, or do you want to go like a small talk to that, I guess?
Yeah, maybe we can finish this round of the status quo by saying, or talking about if you see any pattern coming from your data and your tournament game analysis outside of Frenzy, because we talked about Frenzy.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, even though it of course pains us to say it, Kappa, Elf probably needs some love in general. I would say
a lot of these Night Elf players appear in chat as that they need some love. That's for sure.
I think there's an obvious lesson, I think, from last patch, is that you should be very careful of touching stuff that affects all matchups without being very sure that will not like reduce or have effects on balance, right? So reducing Moonwells is very different from reducing something that only affects one matchup. So and that's the obvious, I feel like the obvious thing to target is to start by like, okay, was it that bad before that last patch, like the balance state in Night Elf matchups? So maybe revert there and then move like what else can you look at between the matchups, right?
So are you saying we shouldn't touch that at all, or should we touch it just more carefully?
My idea is, I think this is like a general Elf feedback, is to revert Moonwells as worse. But if you want to touch Moonwells, which like if you want to touch the late game power Moonwells, which I think was always what people thought was the issue, you can look at that part. So look at the Wellspring part, but keep every build, everything Elf did on early to mid game was structured around how Moonwells, like what power level they had. And I think you've seen a lot of things just crumble. A lot of strategic diversity, I think, has gone down with the Drain with it as well, because a lot of heroes depended so much on that in the early and mid game. I think Warden is like the prime example. So they buff Warden, which sounds like good on paper, but she's like the most Moonwell dependent hero Night Elf has.
Yes.
Probably. So yeah. That's like one obvious thing. I don't think Orc and Human is a lot more buffs. Probably. They've gotten a lot of like buffs over several patches. And the one really difficult one, I guess, is like Undead, because it feels bad to suggest any nerfs, but they also have like some clear strengths that probably needs to get addressed.
All right.
So yeah.
So yeah, what do you want to present then?
There's one final thing I say that like we feel like there's one thing the community might be like, or the general community should be able to, because it's so complicated, but I think it's like an interesting topic, which we are on our suggestions are doing like slightly delving into. But there's like I think there's an idea in or my idea is that every upgrade in Warcraft and stuff like that, just there's a lot of things that take a lot of time. And that's like a thing I would like maybe if we actually had like a proper balance team, like if we knew who they were and they were like super engaged. I would like
just pretend that it's not you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would like them to do like a complete look into like shouldn't upgrades just be a bit more accessible, like in old, because tech switches in Warcraft are so punishing, right? Oh, I'm just casters now. Just give me 4 minutes to research Adept and Master upgrade.
You keep on lagging a little bit. I'm gonna reset the server real quick.
Oh.
Should be better now. So you can react easier and you are in general more flexible. But then this can only go for certain upgrades, because you know the frenzy upgrade is already very fast, and that will hurt.
And that's the issue, right? And also like Warcraft has a pretty well established way of having the game fairly symmetrically made, and a lot of a lot of buildings take the same time, a lot of upgrades take the same time. And I think that's maybe a quality we also need to be a bit like be a bit restrictive in just changing over like day. It might have more like knock-on effects than you think, right? It's a bit difficult to measure.
I feel like it's definitely a Blizzard thing to put numbers like this. They do like their even numbers, and they do like having numbers around the same thing. It's just a cosmetic thing, really. I mean, it's kind of nice for players to know how long an upgrade takes. Like if it's an Adept upgrade and it takes 30 seconds, that would be nice for like memorize it. But some upgrades are like, every upgrade is different, and I totally see why they should have different timings, because they also have like somewhat different cost, right? So you have to factor that in.
Yeah. I mean, and I think there's also like there is more or less of a principle, like different ways to look at it. Some people like that Blizzard way. I knew that when you talked with Monk about it, he was pretty clear that he meant it was good for like game communication in a lack of a better way. It makes it easier for players if like things are standardized over races, over like different things. The more mathematical part of me just says we should just calculate the good value, and I don't care if that's like 1, 3, 6, 7, 2, 5, 4. Like it doesn't matter if it's 40 or 35, whatever number. It depends a bit on the one thing I always wonder about, like the idea of the numbers should be perfectly even, which I mean most people's suggestions still revolve around this, like making these perfect rounded numbers, right? So it's kind of been so hard coded into us by now. But I wonder how much like new players actually do even care about like if the number says 45 seconds.
Or do they even like? I know that, for example, Edo Boy, who is a pretty high level player, at least here in Germany, so he played like top 10 Germany, I'd say. He doesn't know a single number of this game. He just plays by gut feeling. And I don't think he's the only one. And if people on that skill level play by gut feeling, then who is even playing by numbers?
Yeah, I also actually wanted to ask Cappy about this, because like I also don't think he plays as mathematically as people might think. I think he has like an overarching goal. I'm gonna go frenzy push in this matchup. I'm gonna get the like he has all these things, but everything like in no match is equal, right? If he gets a big mana pot and he sells it, It's just because he wants to push the build faster and faster, and you can't he can't calculate that in beforehand. I don't think he thinks like, oh, this means I'm gonna get their frenzy at 8:21 instead of 8:32. Like, it doesn't work like that, right? So in that sense, those timings kind of don't mean much either. Like the number behind the timings. So yeah, I agree. It's kind of a hard thing to like disconnect yourself from, though. Which is because it's just how the game's always been, and it's obvious that they still think that Blizzard patches in that way. They still like do 5% or like do 0.5 or double, which is the most annoying thing. But yeah.
Okay, so do you want to dive into your community feedback spreadsheet or rather not?
Oh, let's see how much time do I have? I have 55 minutes. Yeah, let's do it. But I guess should say yeah, okay, let's just do it. We'll do it.
Okay, we'll do it. Guys, here it is. The perfect balance coming to your home screens right now. Courtesy of Dondolare and SaveOrcas. It is the perfect and the only way that Blizzard should do things.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
I actually really, I would think I would love is if Blizzard was like, this bad game is going to get patched every 6 months, so we can also add more crazy stuff, don't worry about it. But that's like the one thing that maybe I didn't mention, which is difficult to making any suggestion, is you never know, even though it now seems like they have some sort of cycle, since they never say it out loud, we can't know for sure whether a patch is the last one or not.
Yeah, same. We say this every time we patch, and we have to say it again because, we have to be careful because we don't know. Also, because I was asked this a lot, nobody reached out. We reached out to a community manager. I reached out to a community manager in February. 21st February, and offering guidance, counsel, description of the status quo, etc., etc. And they responded pretty much that there's no need at the moment. So, okay, that's kind of that's what we can do.
This is an honest answer, if nothing else.
I guess. But yeah, then. And then we sit here, and all of a sudden there's a PTR, and all of a sudden we have to come up with stuff. Instead, if they give us some sort of notice in February, like, you should slowly start thinking about it, then we would know. But yeah, now it's always in a little bit of a rush because we know that we have 1 iteration, 2 iteration, 3 iteration of time to fix their mess and tell them why they should do what Dondolare and SaveOrcas say.
That scares me, but thank you. It's nice to hear the trust, I guess. I
have no one else, so yeah.
Yeah, we have no one else. That's true. I can say one thing I can say is that me and SaveOrcas went out and got feedback from a lot of people. That doesn't mean that these suggestions are what they always stated or even that they agree on, but it's more to try to do some even matchup stuff, what the things you should target. And then, of course, we have done some evaluations of our own. And as I said last time and several times, these are mostly meant as directional changes, right? Don't get too hung up if you feel like the value is too small, too large. Or even it's just to try to point towards stuff you can look at. Is the way I think it's good for the discussion to look at this. So
yep, that's gonna be a big success. Asking Twitch chat for reasonability. But give me some names. Who was involved?
So let's see. From the Korean side, I talked a lot with Loliet, and Loliet then so Loliet's feedback is then a sum of Focus, Doc, and him, and Soin. Yeah, those 4. Though it's kind of hard to get the complete answer there. I at least got the matchup checks and just stuff like that with them, how they felt the different matchups were, and their general stuff you should maybe look at. In the European scene, Starbuck has been involved. A bunch of elves, of course, because they have their own community, which are vocal. Razor Moon has been active. Dice, I talked a lot with the Razor Moon and Dice about this stuff. Other people, there's actually a lot of people, so now I'm starting to forget them. Yeah, there's more. I just keep on forgetting who. The ones we haven't talked a lot to is, it's kind of hard to reach. Is of course the legend himself, Happy. It's not his jam.
Well,
Talk about this stuff.
there's a very, very easy way to reach him. You know that?
And donate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Inspired. Yeah. Thanks, SaveOrcas. We've got some from Human Player Inspired, and of course it's kind of hard to get good communication with the Chinese scene. It's difficult. We tried to reach out some, but it's kind of hard to get any decent answers. So
Yeah.
they have a tendency to react. So we're gonna get their opinions after, anyways. So it's fine.
All right.
Of course,
Yeah.
we look at every other like suggestions and stuff to try to like vacuum up whatever we can get. So since this was a bit impromptu, the document's like perfectly formed. But I guess like what we can do, Neo, is start with like the neutral, and then go human, orc, night elf, undead. I guess it's like the way to look at it. And also, I have a tab where like stuff we didn't add, which might also be interesting. I think to see if, like, did we miss anything obvious, which might be interesting. So you have neutral up.
Yeah. I share my screen to you. You see what I see.
Yeah, good. Oh yeah, sorry. I have to do it on Discord then. There I am. So first suggestion we have on regarding items. This is for items and neutral heroes. Keep in mind that our changes are always mostly targeted at 1v1, though we try to not like introduce things that are obviously broken in team games. It's a community as well, and they're fun, and we don't want to destroy that game mode. So one of the main things we gotten some feedback on from several players, and also we think pretty strongly ourselves, is that we should reduce the stats of the rings protection +4 and +5 to +3 and +4 respectively. The idea here is that in the current meta, you get a lot of armor stacking heroes, and you get a lot of armor stacking heroes early in the game. One balance-wise, this has like some implications that it favors some heroes over others, but I think more maybe it's like interesting for the game is that it really devalues armies in the early game. Because heroes get so insanely tanky, it becomes like even more of a hero war than like actually having army and positioning. And it becomes maybe a bit too game decisive in certain elements, whether our Demon Hunter arrives with a +7 armor or +3, right? It becomes like hugely important in how the game goes out. So idea there is to reduce armor by 1 for the 2 different items. Also because the items are probably too strong for each of their item pools than how they are now. I don't know, actually, no, I wonder how you feel about this specific thing, Neo.
Yeah, I was about to say that I come from a very different angle, to be honest. I remember when these values were introduced, and it was even crazier, of course, with the ring +3 being available in the lowest item drop table, so we can't really put this side by side, but a little bit. I really like to have tanky heroes, because that means there is more emphasis on heroes without being without the game developing into Dota. I think this puts heroes in a very good spot where the heroes are the anchor of the army, but you can still tear them down. I think the issue with these item pools is not the stats of the rings, because I think they are fine and strong and feel good, but the lack of items in general, and of course the gloves being too weak or too meaningless, especially early game. Like, of course, if you put it late game on a lich, it's kind of fine, but these items are kind of designed to help you in the early game, and the gloves of haste don't really reflect that. So I would rather put more items in that pool, and a couple of items from the campaign could certainly help with that, to also reduce the rings itself, reduce the claws, and even out the power level of the overpowered claws and rings compared to the gloves. And I also think that ring +5 is very, very fine in that item drop table that's at, because we have some strong stuff there. Not to say that you can't optimize that, but I'm a big fan of Rings of Protection. I feel like they were undervalued, and underpowered for a long time, and seeing rings being useful is a good thing for the game.
Good speech. I
Thank
added
you.
it as a mention here then, because I think it's actually interesting debate on like how you attack this. Let's call it not the biggest but existent issue. And this is like kind of where I think my role at least disappears, is when like which items should we introduce?
Yeah.
This is more of the map makers, the guys that know what's available. Because I think we need to also be aware of, even though they did like to introduce their first pick, stuff like that, I don't think the dev team is interesting. Like, let's make a new item, create a new like whole description for it.
Yeah.
Like you have to like work within the parameters that are already there, right?
I did that.
Yeah, I know you did. So this is like where community, I think, can like do very good suggestions, basically.
Yeah, I looked it up yesterday again, but I kind of deleted it again as well. There are some items in the game because the first two drop tables are kind of boring as well. So you have tier 1 items, which are 5 different drops with Ring of Superiority and Slippers, etc. Then you have the second drop table with 3 items, which are just, this is just ridiculous. And then it broadens up. Then you get like 7 different drops, 8 different drops. And also the effect of these items is way more, I don't want to say creative, because it's not really creative, but there's a lot more variety. Like, here's a mischance, here's mana regen, there's a bit of magic immunity. Then of course there's the normal stat boosts. And I think we need more of that earlier on without being overpowered. And there's stuff like, what are they called? Fire gauntlets or something, where you put in a good mix that don't seem overpowered in the early game. And I will certainly work on that. I don't know. There is an Arcanite shield for later on that reduces the amount of range damage you catch. There's an item that boosts armor and HP by a certain percentage. There is, a mini Sobi mask would be nice. Fire hand gauntlets. It's like, my problem is the gloves of haste are too weak. So fire hand gauntlets are still improving attack speed, but also give a little bit of armor, which is still a bit boring, but it should level the playfield a little bit.
Yeah. I think there's like a lot of options there, and you just need to look. I mean, the things I talked a bit with a few guys about buffing Gloves of Haste. The problem is that if you buff it a lot, the item will scale insanely well into the late game. So
yes.
It's kind of hard to find that balance, right?
Yeah. So I think what scales so insane is the attack speed. So you give them a low number of attack speed and a higher number of whatever. But yeah, I mean, this is details. It should be possible. This is going to be my focus of this PTR, to come up with better item pools.
Yeah, cool. Good to know. We'll continue. I mean, this was a digression because I feel like it's an interesting topic. I know that you're.
It's like we have to be done in 1 hour, and we started with the first line.
We'll go fast. Next suggestion is to buff the Anchor Reincarnation slightly. Basically, or decrease the delay from when it activates to when the hero pops up again. So it's now 2 seconds slower than the TC. Of course, the TC also shows up with full mana and full health, so it's not. And that is very good. But I actually think that 7-second delay makes the Ankh pretty weak at points.
Yeah.
And also makes it sold more than it probably should do. It feels like an item that should be super good, but it just becomes like your hero is still gone for 7 seconds. It's quite long. There's always a risk that you TP, the Ankh goes, you TP away, you just die 2 times instead. It's just, I think that would be a good like small buff to that item. I'm not sure, like we talked about, should the item also give more mana, just give you like some more value, because it feels a bit weak in that pool, but again, it can't be like a full level 6 TC ability, right? Then it would be way too strong. So, yeah.
Sounds good.
Then the second part was maybe like another possible way to do like then as well. Could be a combination, could be just one of them. But then give them 50% amount of mana they had the moment they died, instead of 0.
It's kind of crazy, yep.
The idea here is that you get some punishment for dying without using mana, but you don't get like a full punishment. Again, might be. I feel like sometimes the cost, like, or the, let's say your hero lags a sight behind, gets, and snare is might be the one more the obvious things, gets super like fastly killed, and all mana is gone. And when like your army is now returning to get that hero back, TP, or you have to fight because you don't have a TP, for instance. And now the hero has like basically zero value in the fight, right?
Yeah,
So,
but also the other side, because I see someone saying it should have the same amount of mana than when it died. Mana increases in value the later the fight is. So
Yeah.
if that hero is benched for 5 seconds and you preserve that mana, which you can't spend it can't be drained, it can't be burned, then the Mountain King comes back with 75 HP in the last second of a fight and dashes out bold, then that's really freaking strong. So I agree with the penalty.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with the penalty this way. Well, but it's like finding the perfect balance, I guess, between like per like 100% penalty and
Yeah.
0.
Yeah.
50% I think would be maybe a good like middle ground. I still think that like this item wouldn't be, by this it would be like, oh my god, I got an Ankh, and you jump in the roof and are so happy. Because Ankhs are like weird in the fake case that it's kinda only if you do a mistake it gets used. And it's scary to try to calculate an Ankh usage. Because like the army can then move after and stuff like that, right? So it's not obvious that you can like game the system in that way. Yeah. Okay, we keep doing. We add stuff that are in the PTR we liked. So stuff that are in the PTR we liked or think are okay, or at least when meaningful discussion around it, we include. So the Firelord Volcano building damage vector, sure. Yeah, people find this as a meme, but it's super strong in FFA and team-based modes.
Yeah, I said this as well in my feedback. Volcano against buildings in FFA is completely insane. And if it doesn't damage the one-on-one mode, why not introduce it or change it?
Yep. And we also included then the Nagase Sewage Tornado Speed. I did some testing as well. You did as well, Neo, I know. I didn't see like that looked like it had such a huge difference that it might look like. It doubles some value. Wow, this should be looking very different. But we might see. I mean, in practical terms, it doesn't change the AoE like range of the tornado or stuff like that would actually like make it super a lot stronger, I think. So I don't think this is like bad to try.
Yeah, it's a bit quality of life.
Yeah, it makes the tornado move like not in the snail's pace, which is fine.
Yeah.
We wonder if we're gonna reduce the Naga Shield's mana shield activation cost from 25 to 10. And the idea here is that Mana Shield is not a bad ability by itself, but it's just weird that it had such a high penalty for activating it.
Same as Immolation had before.
Yeah, it makes you overly have to worry about using it, and Naga is like a super, of course, especially in late game where maybe you have Mana Shield, is pretty mana dependent, but you like in the Frost, this would maybe open more the way of like the Frost Arrow mana a shield build if that's like a thing. But otherwise, I just think also like Naga scales pretty bad when it gets beyond level 5. So like this is fine to make her a bit stronger in that sense as well, right? So, but this is of course you have, if you think her changes somewhere like important, somewhere less important. This is of course on the very less important side.
Yeah,
you can just say that out loud. And then we have one thing SaveOrcas really likes to do. I have to be honest there, is to look at the hero like scaling and see if I can do small changes to make the hero scale better or more logically in their roles, right? So this is like small changes, this Beastmaster thing, but the idea is to you change how the hero levels scale, how the levels of strength, intelligence, agility scale per level to get like breakpoints, because the way Warcraft works is that when you level, it calculates that you add this point number, and if it like goes over a certain value, you add 2 at certain levels, basically. If it's 1.2, 1.4, etc. And this change would make it so that Beastmaster gets +1 strength and intelligence at level 2 compared to how it does now, but loses agility later.
Quick question here. Are we sure that that's really the case, or does it just display this way? For example, the armor value, if it's displayed as 4.4, or I think 4.5, is it working as a 4.5 or is it just working as a 4 as it is displayed as a 4?
Mr. SaveOrcas should be like the main answer to this. I do think it works like this. I mean, I think we tested that before, like in other areas. But yeah, we'll do extra checks, Neo.
Wonderful. Wonderful. This is the quality of life, or the quality assurance that I expect here from this council.
Nice. The last one is super small. But again, you can change small, get some very small differences. Is that if you change the numbers from how like the spawn interval thing is for the Goblin Factory, you get one more like small guy that chops you at level 2, basically.
All right.
And also has like better has logical scaling, 7, 9, 11, 13 instead of 7, 8, 11, 13.
Okay, this was very small. Give me something juicy.
Human.
Yeah, let's go. Let's ruin the race again.
I'm a human player. I'm just saying that before you kill me.
Yeah, you say that.
So, you talked about this earlier, and I also talked about this in the earlier feedback. Arcane Tower got a pretty big mana drain buff, and it's still very, and it remains in place.
Yeah.
Draining 16 mana per shot with 1 second cooldown is very strong.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we should go all the way back to 12, as it used to be. Yeah. Maybe start by going down to 14. But it feels a bit too rewarding to just be like, okay, there's a hero in my peasant line this now, but I have an Arcane Tower, so I don't care. It doesn't matter. The Arcane Tower is just going to drain the mana. It's going to take long for him to do much. And just like the fact that you can run a hero into range for 2-3 seconds and lose 40... Well, how much is it? 48 mana, right? Is... sounds a lot to me, like just in value.
100% agree. We yelled from the rooftops about this at the past patch in November. I'll keep yelling, keep the Arcane Tower strong, but take his insanity away. And I think this is a good value.
Yeah. And then we have a other suggestion than the PTR for Sundering Blades, and that's just removing it altogether. Though I would say this kind of depends on one thing in my book, or in my head at least. Sundering Blades was introduced. I actually still kind of trying to find like the reasoning is not that. I mean, it was meant to give. It was 2 things I think it was targeting. One, it was targeting mountain giants to make it easier because they have medium armor. But I think more important and what matters in matchups is that it targets fiends, right? Yeah. This was the days when human barely survived undead pushes, and those like first 2-3 nights then had by bigger success against fiends, and then you could like snowball from there. That's no longer the case. It's a lot of the cases now where the knights appear before the undead gets like their main army out in a lot of cases, and like of course I would let me go to Undead later. Banshees are very strong in that matchup, which makes knights weak when Banshees are out. But also the reason Undeads need to go Banshees is because knights are so strong. So it would be unfair to just cap one of the sides there. Hence, I think like giving knights a now unnecessary plus 10% damage against fiends, it doesn't like add up in the current meta. It was always a very clunky introduction in my head. Like, why should knights specifically be like, oh, they are super good at this, targeting this specific unit for reason, right? It felt a very clunky way to address that problematic side of the matchup. So this is a nerf to the human power spike at tier 3, and a slight buff to the survivability of fiends at the same point. But then, of course, some people might be angry. We also suggest removing lumber mill as requirement to build them. I don't think this is like super impactful in a lot of cases, but it might help. For instance, the few cases you go one base and you maybe want to transition into knights. It also feels like maybe a very clumsy requirement for knights. Like there's no blacksmith makes sense. Lumber mill is kind of why? Why do you have to have a lumber mill to build a knight, right?
I guess it was implemented because you have the building already and they wanted still to put some obstacles in the tech tree.
Yeah. But then again, they suggest to put Torrents at tier 2, so it's shit, hard to understand. But that's like I would call this a small buff, quality of life improvement maybe. I think it mainly would help. It wouldn't matter in most games, very few games, but maybe some games where you might want to transition into knights on one base. Sounds a bit hypothetical, but maybe some Night Elf games, some Orc games could work. Like if you go rifle push against Night Elf and the game drags out, maybe it like somehow turns into tier 3 game. You wouldn't have the lumber mill probably. So yeah.
And I think if we learn something from this version of the patch is that if you have a chance to transition, it's really, really good for the game. So pushes are not meant to be a one and done thing, but you have a fallback net, even though that's a very low fallback net. That's a good thing for the game, as displayed in Human Undead at like the Bad Boom Dubai tournament, which was pretty much peak Warcraft.
Yeah, I agree. Like in general, I feel like tech requirements and requirements like that stop you from progressing should have very good reasons to be there, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just being like a barrier.
Yeah.
Next one, reducing siege engine armor. So I feel like we already talked about it, but we didn't include the curse change, shockingly maybe, in our suggestions. Because I feel like, okay, in my personal opinion, just like how the games I like to watch, I wouldn't mind a world where tanks were completely meaningless in the purpose they are now. Just like the 12 tanks into a main base, 42 loses all his heroes, but it doesn't matter because he kills the last building. I wouldn't mind if that was gone forever. But siege engines do two things now. They support the tier 3 first push humans sometimes do, because they gain an advantage in the early game or are pretty even. They can do like a knight 2 siege engine push against Expo and kind of break the game from there. Or it's probably their only good option when the Undead stabilizes with mass banshees. And if you remove that options completely by introducing curse, which they already go banshees in the latter case, I don't see how human does a good counter against mass banshees. And some people will say mortar breakers. Problem is that breakers are pretty bad against everything that is attacking you with melee, and even fiends. I would say they're not very good in of itself. But secondly, just the fact that mortars will get sniped so easily by Nova, require carrion and coil, makes it very hard to actually do that in practice. We've seen, of course, Happy has extremely good control, but it's so hard to get those mortar shots to target enough of the banshees that they still don't steal 4 of your knights, and the game is basically over, right? So I don't think removing tanks is a good option, like completely, if you don't have better ideas for how to fix that like late game situation. And since removing units completely just by itself is probably not a good idea, our suggestion is to reduce their like power level slightly by reducing armor. The idea here is since you can reduce HP as well. But HP is I would say HP matters more against hero spells, armor matters more against units. So this is a way to make tanks weaker against like good multitasking, ghouls sent on its own, while HP would be more of a nerf against heroes, is the way we interpret it at least.
If you nerf... Yeah. I'm not 100% sure how this works, but if you nerf HP, also the repair rate would be lower?
Yeah, and it will get faster back from staffs, which doesn't matter a bit. So yeah. So I mean, there's probably the bigger and more like weird changes you can do with tanks. I just want to propose that if people like suggest just remove tanks from the game, basically, as First would do. They need to like come up with some rework of the whole late game synergy, human undead.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah. Then this is like we are going to do with every race, by the way. So this is not only for the human casters before people go insane, because people like priests, master, is that weak? But the idea is that master training for all casters is very limiting. It's 75 seconds. It's very slow. So maybe just reduce for every master training for casters, with one exception. One caster researchers master far faster than 60 seconds. And Drill the Claw, I think, right? But otherwise, reduce master training to 60 seconds. This would also probably make some builds. This doesn't matter a lot, but it makes some builds more attractive, right?
Doesn't this interfere with what you said before, that upgrades should have their own value and should not be that streamlined?
Yeah, that's an argument you can make against this, right? You should just look at everyone individually. So this is like we made a suggestion to reduce like overall research time for master to make master training for all races more available. But maybe it should be more individualized. So yeah.
In general, I don't hate it because more flexibility seems to be very good as long as it's not like an instant upgrade, but a minute is still a long time in Warcraft.
Yeah. And then the polymorph change. We included it here more as a discussion point than anything else. And the feedback has been quite varied on that point, I feel like. Some people are 100% sure it's going to just like break the game completely. Others are more inclined to say that it sounds very situational. Maybe like in certain very specific situation and criteria it's going to be super strong, but it's not going to happen that often. That can kind of be compared to maybe like that some ultimates are maybe semi-broken, but you never get to them in like a normal game. So like how much does it matter, stuff like that. Like Resurrection is like a classic, it could be super broken, but it's never seen, and it's like when it actually is used, it's often not that impactful. It's like super rare to see it happen. But I would say that I think the feedback from other game modes, especially FFA, has been that this will completely bust FFA. I would like to have some FFA people talk more like specifically why that is the case, but I guess it's more to do what you get more late game armies. You get like having enough mana and getting time for master sources is not an issue in FFA. It is an issue in 1v1, right? Which will be the argument. Even so, if you still like the change and you're like, this has to be included, it can't be 3 seconds. You can't have Hex, a hero ability, on a unit. In my opinion, it's just too strong. Like, I guess it's a very like specific certain amount of cases you have it, but 3 seconds lockdown without being able to use items, do anything like proactively, is too strong.
But you have possession on a Banshee, which is an ultimate skill basically of a Dark Ranger.
True, but you can't possess a hero at least, or can you?
Should you?
Should you? Yeah, but I think possession. It's a super strong ability, and maybe there's some Banshee stuff there as well. We'll see. And then the last one is just very small. Try to like do something with armor values, because armor values are, especially leather armor, like the armor for early rifles, are very rarely researched. Maybe make it very tiny but cheaper on level 1. This is like pure number calculating. Try to like look at what the armor upgrades cost for different races and stuff, and try to streamline. Again, maybe it shouldn't be streamlined. Maybe it doesn't matter.
All right. That sounds pretty reasonable, I gotta say. I really like the different way to address siege engines, because they've always been a cool role player. They just shouldn't dominate a game. That, like, if tanks are played in an extreme way, super toxic and also kind of boring. But I like their role as a time creator.
I think they work usually a lot more interesting in the elf games. Do you see them? Mm-hmm. It's more like elves, because elf have ancient wars, have a lot of countermeasures, and it's more about like tanks buy time to get to third base, and then like so. And it feels like the games go more like different ways. Well, Undead, it feels more always like a base rush if you go mass tanks, right? It's like, I'm just going to send everything in at some point and just pray. You
could argue that that's because Fairy Fire works on tanks and Curse doesn't.
Might be. But again, I think that's fine.
The disagreement in your tone. Like, okay. Move on. I know you're on limited time.
It's fair. Orc, this is probably where it's like something controversial. I think might be. We'll see. we gotten a lot of feedback, Night Elf and Undead players specifically, that mirror image is too strong currently. Maybe it doesn't seem like super obvious to people. It's not like you see like, oh, every game just happens. He got killed by 15 mirror images in of itself. But it is a summon in practical terms that has a lot of HP, especially on higher levels. It scales super well. Your mirror images also gain armor from items and stuff, right? So they're stronger with the better hero. I think just like looking at the value, if you didn't know about it beforehand, comparing it to other hero values, the cooldown being 3 seconds is insane. Most summon in the game have quite a longer cooldown than this. It basically makes every 3 seconds an opponent player that, especially if they don't have easy access to the spell, might have to spend like 1,000 damage in 3 seconds. If they're able, that's a lot of damage. They have to have a huge army, and then they have to and then they can reapply the same thing after 3 seconds. It's just too strong by the values, and I think this is one of the things that have removed, and maybe people should keep it removed. That's like an argument, of course, but it has removed kinda tier 1 elf for the meta and talents for the meta. I think this is important in both cases, because it just creates so much of a tank that it's impossible for like the lower tier Night Elf units to go through, and it forces Night Elf into Dryads and Bears basically, which has been like the common different kinds of meta recently in most pro games.
So a couple of minutes ago you said that you shouldn't double any values, and now you're boosting something from 3 to 8.
Yeah. Here I'm being a bit extreme, but I also think that of course I have to defend this. 3 seconds is extremely short. 8 seconds is more or less in tune with the entangle. Like the way I thought about it is like you want to make it somewhat in tune with the entangle duration. So in this case, you could like get an entangle, and you have to spend 1 second entangle before you can throw mirror image. Because there's an interaction there that's super important. I feel like 8 seconds still for a summon is super short cooldown.
Also, to kind of defend this, the 3-second cooldown was used for the old mirror image before it was a summon, and it was never intended as a summon for this 3-second value. So it is fair that this is streamlined, because it's just a value that was forgotten to be addressed when the mirror images do damage now change came in.
Yeah. And then last second, I mean, someone Or's gonna hate me those first 3 points. God damn it. Yeah, I'll leave with it. Reducing Shadowhunters level 3 specifically, Serpent Wards damage by 5, from 45 to 52 to 43, 47. The idea here is that we talked about it earlier. Especially if you keep both of them, like not change any of them. The level 5 Blade Master and level 5 SH combo now for Night Elf is more or less, it's not unbeatable, but it's super strong, even beyond maybe what's reasonable for a breaking point. And reducing wards on level 3 is maybe the obvious one. I think reducing on level 2 is a lot scarier, because there's so much of the fights that appear at level 3 SH. But I think it's fair to maybe reduce like the overwhelming I can never come back from this game that level 5 Shadowhunter provides for against Elf currently. Especially if you go anything else than like Bears, I think. If you go Talons or anything looking like a Huntress against level 3 ward, it's just going to die on impact, basically.
So this, to me, on first view, I haven't seen this before, sounds a bit extreme. Like, is 10% really necessary? Is it too much? Did you think of other values?
It might be too much. It might also be that the original buffs to Serpent Wards was a bit extreme, but it took a long time before people noticed them.
Yeah,
I think Serpent Wards is a bit like Headhunters and Ghouls in that the changes were made and they didn't get adapted before years later.
Yeah,
and then maybe when you now look at it, it's like, why were they ever like buffed to that
True.
number?
Okay,
but I mean, it can depend, right? So the thing is, it's always like a discussion, right? Is 5% enough? And is that like something you would notice? Maybe not. I guess we can like, this is values you can test, and I would like, or an orc players on Musk can like give their feedback on, is this way too much? Is it enough? Is it too little?
Yeah.
And then the next one. I mean, this is more of the small changes, Neo. So I don't think this is as obviously changing, but reducing troll hunters damage by 1. Very small change. But again, like headhunters got a nerf, and I think people not only they got a nerf in this how long it takes to reduce, 2 seconds longer. It's not doesn't do anything. Like it's not nothing, but it's not very big. It also got originally a 25 HP nerf. Nobody liked that because they made them too weak. And the argument has always been that you should probably target if you think headhunters are slightly too strong. Target what they are too strong at. They're not very survivable, but they do a ton of damage. So the idea here is and what we saw from the balance as well, right? Is we have the idea that undeads already do well against orc. Human orc is fairly close, maybe a slightly orc favored. You shouldn't do huge changes here, right? So a very small change on the how big of a factor or headhunters are in the early game, and then maybe see if that is good for the state of the orc versus human matchup.
Yeah,
it's such a small change that the damage output in the late game is not affected barely, I would say, when they get Berserker upgrade and stuff.
And I mean, it's kind of a trade-off, right? You reduce Arcane Tower, which are kind of essential to human, and you take something away from the early game. And I can only assume that you nerf the Ghoul Frenzy as well, which is also, of course, kind of correlating to Headhunters.
Yep.
Yeah.
You assume correctly.
I'm smart. And I know you.
And then you have the research time again here. The different mass.
You jump over heal wards.
Oh, heal wards. Heal wards. Decrease mana cost for heal wards. Still underutilized. Still arguably the only heal option that Orc would have in the late game, except healing staffs, which at some point will get a bit outdated in the game. So the idea here is to make it slightly more accessible. You have like two effects going in the same direction here, right? Master Training going shorter and heal wards being slightly cheaper.
It's a double buff, man. It's scary.
Yeah. It's scary, maybe. I'm not sure how scary they are. I think heal wards will always, in the best use case, probably be most impactful in heal in your base after a fight thing. But, of course, it depends if Torrents are at tier 2. Then it's a bit different. Because then you start your tier 3 with orcs and that Torrent's already in place, right? Which is different.
Yeah.
We didn't include Torrents at tier 2 here. I can just say that immediately. I think that's a very bad idea. I think of course you have to prove that it's balance-wise a problem. I think it will be a huge issue in human matchup. I think it might be an issue in undead matchup. Might also be an issue in elf matchup. It might take time before you figure how to replace grunts in tier 2 with torrents.
Yeah.
But torrents are, and I hate people say this, torrents are a lot better than grunts. They just are. They do have pulverize, just a weaker version at tier 2 with this if the chains go through.
Little disclaimer here. I know we talked about this in private, but I have seen this on the stream and in the chat. I know Grubby tested grunts versus Torrent by attacking a building. This is not the use case for Torrent. Please just don't repeat this. Please just don't parrot this. Torrents are conceptually different from grunts because they do AoE, and this is of course important versus humans, versus units. So please don't say torrents are just big grunts. It's different.
They are different. I'm just I worry about options where Orc has tier 2 expos, for instance, against human, and just gets torrents instead of grunts in that army. Stuff like that I think is hard to balance. And I think also just conceptually from a game design perspective, Orcs will then have no units that unlocks at tier 3.
Yeah, that is...
And who has ever said that the weakness and the problem of Orc is that their tier 2 is lacking?
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me. The Orcs probably, along with human, have the strongest tier 2 in the game.
That's right.
Why do we need to put even more options, even more strength into that tier, and also try to even less incentivize Orcs to go tier 3?
Plus, Yeah, you take away from the tier 3, which is a beautiful tier 3 usually, because of all the upgrades and opportunities they get, and you clearly devalue grunts. So you take 2 core aspects away for giving Tauren a better chance. I played around with the idea of having Tauren in a weaker version on tier 2 and give them a lot of stats back with the Pulverize upgrade. But I think this just hurts the variety in the game. It hurts the gameplay and design of the Orc race if you do this.
Yep. So like even beyond balance, which I think will sooner or later unlock a lot of issues, is just I don't get it from a game design perspective. So yeah.
That's right. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if they sit in Irvine and say, "Oh yeah, we didn't even notice that no tier 3 unit. That's bad."
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if that change makes it through.
Yeah, me too. It is interesting. Like you can do the thought experiment of just do every tier 3 unit and tier 2 then and see how in some cases it would absolutely break the game.
Tier 2 Frostworms, let's go!
A tier 2 Knights against Undead.
Yeah, I have Frostworms then though.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, even worse. So.
There you go.
Yeah. And then our favorite Night Elves. Go for the Night Elf tab, I guess.
Oh, we done here? I guess this is master training reduction.
We have two more reduction, and then we have our suggestion was to adapt the Spirit Walker research time, so it's not the Spirit Walker doesn't have like an insanely fast research time than other casters. Because if you reduce master and it already reduced adept, right, it kind of makes zero sense. But as a sort of compensation, and also maybe make Torrents a bit interesting, reduce the build time of the totem. So you get that tech tree faster.
All right, so it's
the math equation here.
It's eventually the same. Like it comes out the same. Just the first walker is faster.
Yeah, the same first walker faster, and then the research takes a bit longer to compensate for it getting faster on master, right? So it doesn't become like too strong.
All right, so. Earlier Spirit Link, earlier magic damage, later Dispel.
Yeah.
Spirit
and earlier Torrents, if you're going for Torrent, I guess.
Well, yeah, true. That's not bad. I mean, Spirit Link is very strong, and there might be timing issues with that, maybe eventually. But this could open up quite a bit. Also, the Spirit Walker Wyvern build that we see rarely, but to a degree.
Yeah.
First impression is I like this totem change a lot, but I'd have to think about it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see what people think.
Night Elf. Account create. If you come into this channel and continue whining, I will ban you indefinitely.
Wow. Poor account create. Poor Paul.
He deserves it.
Okay. Our first suggestion is maybe not like the most impactful balance-wise, but it's more an idea that we're doing other stuff now that will make Warden hopefully better. And also that I still think like the power curve of Fan of Knives now is a bit weird in that it has a lot, like the increase to damage, theoretical damage, if it hits all targets at level 3 was very big in the last patch. But you never get there. Usually, or you rarely get there because of the Moonwell nerfs. We're going to get a Moonwell buff, right? In our suggestions.
Okay.
Hence, we changed it for a fan of unit cap from 5, 6, 7 to 6 on all levels. To even out like the power curve of the spell a bit.
One
change, but...
Yeah. I just see in chat it might be important, so I kind of want to go back to Orc real quick, because Tedstar is saying if you do that, it's also hard, the totem build time, it's also harder to cancel it because it gains more HP per second.
That will be true, yeah.
So I don't know if you thought about that, but that is definitely a factor for maybe Night Elves if Talons come back, and Human if they go for that tier 2 push. So something to keep in mind.
Noted.
Good. Okay. Sorry. Now we continue with the war.
It's fine. It's good. Princess of the Moon says the Phantom Knight's cat changed just like a bit of how the direction, making slightly weaker at the end game versus a full-sized army, but making it stronger in the early game comparatively. Also, as a reason for the other changes would be like the reasoning here. Princess of the Moon, we included the one part of the PTR change with a small change. We would say that you should also increase damage on level 1 if you're going to do that change, because it's mostly impactful on level 1, even more, a lot more than level 2 and 3. So I don't get like why they only should target level 2 and 3 if you want to see more bottom. It will only change in mirror. This change.
Yes.
It won't affect anything else than mirror. And the reason we didn't include the other change as well is because I'm a bit worried if you reduce mana by 3, which is quite substantial, and increase damage, will we only see bottom mirror? You gotta be a bit careful with finding the perfect balance there between bottom being like an equally good option to DH if you want to see like a perfect split or like options there, and bottom just being straight up better.
Yeah.
And we already see bottom played quite a bit, I would say. It's not that rare anymore. So, yeah.
To double down on it, Night Elf Mirror always had this stigma that Bear Mirrors are boring, and I definitely agree. I do think that Huntress Mirror is even more boring than Bear Mirror. And the most beautiful thing in Night Elf Mirror is if we have mass range versus melee, and those interactions, and also a bit of diversity. Like, I don't mind one bottom game in a best of 5. It's totally fine, especially when it's like with a little bit finesse and push timings, etc. So we should be very careful to push this matchup into Huntress Mirror, because it takes away any chance of variety in that Talon versus Bear possibility.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the feedback you got from most Night Elves as well. Like, they like having bottom as an option in Night Elf Mirror. And I think you have also like a split between Night Elves, that they are like a bottom player or a demon player.
Yeah.
And they kind of want to keep to be doing their style. They don't want to be forced into doing one or the other.
Yeah.
And currently it seems to be at least close to in a good state between those two options. Gotta be a bit careful from doing like only one. Yeah, the second two were in the last like suggestions. Well, this is maybe small, but make Starfall a bit more impactful in that, give it a bit more burst damage, but less damage over time. This is a bit difficult though, because from what I can have seen, it's pretty strong already in FFA and like big modes. But in 1v1, except in Podomir, it's probably a meme. You cancel it, the damage is just way too slow. So this might be like a good compensation, but here I really want to hear the FFA and team guys say like no or yes or whatever.
Well,
I mean, Lilu might win even more FFAs with this, and we gotta stop that. Yeah, and then the big one, I think, for Night Elves that have been requested throughout, and also a lot of actually other pros said just do this, just make it easy on yourself, just do revert this change. And that's increasing Moonwell regeneration rate that was reduced in the last patch. Kind of added at the like last 2 days of the PTR without much fanfare, and then just kept in the game without actually testing properly. It has basically it's not that much HP and mana different restored compared to how it used to be if you look at the numbers, but it's enough that I think you pushed like the risk reward factor for Night Elf a bit too much in the wrong direction and made them weaker overall in the early game. And mid-game against all races, and I think you see in tournaments that Night Elves are suffering a bit because of this. It's like it's not reduced to the degree that Night Elves are completely obliterated from the map, but they are doing pretty poorly overall. So this would be like a way to a general small but important buff to Night Elf. So you should kind of just push the whole race a tiny bit upwards. Yeah.
Yeah, feels good, feels right.
And the second part then is we also got feedback, and the reason I think Moonwell nerf was a suggestion like or a topic at all earlier is the fact that in the very late game, so-called super wells, as they also called them themselves, are very strong. So our suggestion is to bump up the value of Moonwells in the early mid and to like early late game, and then reduce how much mana you get from Wellspring in addition to the normal mana. So you reduce the part of the Moonwells that were a bit problematic, and the fact that you can like, it was like you have the super wells, but you make them better in the early mid game. So you give Night Elf a better template or access to get into the late game on a better footing, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds reasonable.
Yeah. And then, this is probably maybe not that controversial. Maybe it is, I'm not sure actually. This is also like, we got feedback that people want easier access to Ultra Vision. The costs maybe not mattering that much, 50-50 or 50-25, kind of similar, but the research time is kind of long, 45 seconds. So it's often queued in the Hunter's Hall, or maybe not even research at all. For me, Ultra Vision is like a key, or a core component of Night Elf race, right? It's like one of the things that give them individuality in the game is the fact that they have the ability at one certain aspect of the game to have like a small advantage built into the race. Undeads have good regional blight. Every race has like this small stuff. That kind of militia is like a very unique aspect of human in general. And removing or making Ultra Vision so hard to get, it's not super hard, but hard to get, removes a core component of that race. But you kind of have to find your value here, because I think a lot of the explanation in why Tier 1 Night Elf was too strong against Orc earlier was the fact that it was located on Tier 1.
Yeah.
At least that was like the theory. So this might be like a good compensation. A lot of elves wanted it back on Tier 1. We were a bit reluctant to go all that way. But let's at least make it so when you hit Tier 2, you can get it fast and very cheap. It's just like something you can do immediately without thinking of it. Which is
I think lumber is also an issue early stages Tier 2, especially you might be exposed to a little bit of Whisperers, so you got to move them around. Hunter's Hall costs lumber, and Dryads are very hairy in lumber as well. So taking a bit of that load away seems fine. Yeah. For an optional upgrade.
I think so too. But again, we'll see what people think.
Yeah.
And then lastly, again, in line with everything else, I mean, and this is probably one of the more possible impactful Master Training changes, is reducing Druid of Talon Master Training from 75 to 60 seconds. So I mean, people might now scream, oh, I'm scared of Master Talons again. Master Talons against Orc. Kind of strategy we don't see anymore. And I think there's other reasons besides this that make it more difficult to use. So I don't think this is like super bad. I also think maybe it's good to incentivize Talon usage a bit more. They're still underutilized in the meta.
Yeah, I'm a bit careful here. This sounds dangerous. It's just 15 seconds, but it was like if you play this strat, timing is crucial, and it's just the time as an orc you can still survive, I guess, until the raiders take over very much later. I'm a bit reluctant to agree to this change. This would definitely be an upgrade that if you apply upgrade timings one by one, this would be on the later end because it's just that good.
Yeah, might be. It is noted. I wrote Neo is scared, keep it in mind with caps lock.
Caps lock is important. Thank you.
Yeah. I think one of the ideas we probably have is to try to like get some, also like from what we read on Reddit and stuff and whatever, and also but just try to ask people a bit to get like more feedback on when the suggestions now are actually out, like, and see what people think. And we'll try to do like some delving into. And of course, the company itself can just ignore everything, so it doesn't matter in that sense. It's up to them. Yeah. And then the Mountain Giant food cost was introduced by Blizzard in the PTR. We keep it here, but we're kind of reluctant, to be honest, personally. I think it was reduced to 6 food at one point, then reverted back to 7. It was reverted back to 7. That was with double taunt, so it's like a completely different unit back then. The thing I wonder is like this might be in a super late game situation for Elf makes it so they have one or two more support units. That's like the main thing I would think this would change. I'm not sure I think that much about you're going to get one more Mountain Giant, you're going to get your 7th instead of your 6th Mountain Giant. That sounds a bit niche to me. But maybe getting those 2 like extra bears or those 3 extra fairy dragons against human, for instance, might be a bit too strong, right? So I know that Loliot mentioned he had like a React stream the other day and said that he feels like this is probably too strong.
Okay.
And I feel like when Loliot says it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, this is something I mentioned as well when I did my initial review. I'm not too sure how crazy this is, but it could be like an extra fairy dragon as well, right? Kinda. So
yeah.
It's the difference of having flair or not, and that's a big difference, of course, in an army. Might not play out that way in detail, but I wouldn't mind to try, but I see the risks for sure.
Yep. And then Warple Blades, sure.
Yeah.
Doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
I think you can make it 5 seconds. I'm sure it's still.
All right, before we dive into Undead, I know you're on limited time again, as I said half an hour ago, but there's so many people saying, this race gets 2 nerfs and 7 buffs, and my race only gets 4 buffs and 6 nerfs. Guys, the amount of buffs and nerfs don't matter. If you think that matters, we make a trade. You give me money 5 times and I give you money 5 times. But you give me $1,000 each time and I give you $1 each time. Do you see how that works? I know, and I hate to say it, but it's coming from the Grubby echo chamber. It's not Grubby's fault, it's the echo chamber's fault, but it doesn't matter. The quantity of buffs and nerfs doesn't matter one bit. Thank you. Now we can move on to Undead.
And I'll add on also another comments that I see, which I don't disagree with actually. It's the fact that, I mean, our suggestions is mostly related to balance, and they have to keep in mind what is meta currently, right? And also, first 2 things. First of all, I'm not inclined personally to have very good creative suggestions to new stuff, like or complete reworks. I still think that the thing they did with talents was brilliant, to be honest, like making it piercing, but I would never come up with that myself.
Yeah.
It's very smart. But I also would say that it's kind of hard for people, the community, whoever want to make these suggestions, even if it was like a balance council, for that to work, the Blizzard team would have to be more public, and that's something we're looking for.
Yeah.
And if they are, I think that would be more interesting to like really go buck wild and just like say do redesigns and stuff, or like actually then try to make somewhat of a StarCraft as a balance council that actually do more shakeups. Before then, the thing I try to do is kind of just like reinterpret pro feedback depending on how the meta is currently.
Yeah.
Just like that's what the limitation I work within, which I have completely understanding is also pretty boring. Just how it is. It's pretty boring.
It's just like you are.
Thanks.
That's not true.
And a lot of stuff here.
Hi.
So, Frost Nova. This was an idea for earlier time as well. I also heard other suggestions. There's a pretty general vibe that they feel like Nova is a bit too strong overall. This suggestion would make it so units are slowed slightly shorter on level 2 and 3. I think level 1 Nova is scary to touch in that sense, because I mean it's not like the Undeads are dominating Roll Me 1 on level 2 against, for instance, Human and Footmen. But once level 3 hits, Nova becomes super strong against units. Basically, and on level 3, it's kind of Nova with 8 seconds slow. It's kind of almost like an ensnare. It isn't, but it kind of feels like it against units, right? It's super powerful and makes a lot of compositions very, very weak in the end game. So the idea here is to make it slow slightly less on units. We keep the slow on heroes, though. I think changing on heroes is a lot more difficult to measure the effects on. But yeah. And then, second, reducing death and decay mana cost from 250 to 200. Duration from 35 to 30. It makes it cheaper, goes a bit faster, more viable, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Not a big change, but it is. The second one, the third one, is another of the scaling thingies, where you basically change how the scale levels of the Crippler scale, which we also have to double check, of course. So it gets 1 plus intelligence level 2. The idea here is that if you go Criplord, you're really dependent on having mana for beetles, for having mana for impale and stuff. So maybe having that extra mana makes him slightly more useful in the early game.
point by Korek regarding the death and decay. The 35 seconds are introduced, so it ends up with 100% of damage. So if death and decay goes through fully, you kill that building you target.
Yeah.
But if you do it as it is now, you only reduce the building's HP to 10%.
I think the idea here, I can't remember actually, it was me or SaveOrcas wrote it. It's the fact as that you increase the damage per second then, so you keep the complete damage over time, right?
Has to be mentioned then.
Yeah, has to be mentioned. I agree. We'll add it.
Very good, Korek. Very good. Korek 5, I like you more than Korek 1, 2, 3, and 4.
And then next change, reducing Haunted Goldmine build time, and here we have a conundrum. Early game expo currently for Undead against Human is slightly too weak for Undead probably, or slightly too easy to punish. But you don't want to universally buff Undead expo because you have another matchup to keep in mind, and that is Night Elf.
Of course, how could we ever forget about Night Elf matchups?
So this is first is reducing Haunted Goldmine build time from 110 to 105 seconds. I mean, I would like if you do enough compensation on the other end, you might even suggest 100 seconds. But to slightly reduce the very long window a human has to cancel that. I still find because I played a lot under also the 100-second when it was common meta, and now I still find it somewhat surprising. I arrive at an expo and it's 85% complete, and I still am able to kill it and cancel it. And that surprises me a bit. I think it's too... I mean, the general feedback has been that this is one of the things you can address easily to get the matchup more in line, basically. Yeah. So, yeah. And the next one is to reduce the graveyard build time by 5 seconds. Not the biggest changes, but it streamlines a lot of... If you actually want to try Fiend builds, this makes them more streamlined, basically. There's some builds where this will just make it so it adds a lot more fluently than it otherwise does. Makes it very slightly harder to cancel graveyard, though that doesn't matter that often.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes against human. And then the two big changes. I think this is where we kind of have to delve into a bit. We suggest two changes in tandem, but these are impactful. So these have to be discussed forever, I think. Reduce Ghoul Frenzy attack rate from 35 to 25%. Increase research time for Ghoul Frenzy from 45 to 60 seconds. And the thing is here, 35-25% people are oh my god, it's such a huge change. It's reducing DPS by 1. That's the de facto thing it does. It's not as big of a change as you think, and also keep in mind that DPS only matters over time. The first attack still does the same damage and still hits as fast as it always had. Then the next attacks have a slightly longer cooldown between the next attack, and over a substantial amount of attacks, that 1 DPS will be realized.
And then it's your own fault if you don't kite against that or deal with it with ghouls anyway.
So it is not as close to big as a change as people think. You can even make test maps and see how fast things take to kill. It's not that big. That's why I think 35 to 30 is maybe more or less insignificant in practice. The thing is, 25-35% buff in its time happened and nobody used ghouls. Still. What we will never know is if people just started playing ghouls back then without that buff, would ghouls still be strong? I don't think it's impossible to know. And I think if we want to address the ghouls power level, we need to address it more than 5% or 0.5 DPS reduction. So yeah. I also disagree with Griffin writes that the frenzy buff was what pushed it into meta. I don't think that's true at all. I think people got better at playing it and just started experimenting, which they hadn't done for...
I think what pushed them into meta is expansions.
Yeah.
Because you can't expand with fiends and you can't expand with ghouls, so you have to play ghouls because an expansion was that strong. And of course it pairs well with the Crypt Lord, so that helps as well. This damage value is not what pushed it into meta. I agree.
Yeah. And the other change is more to try to do something with the timing itself.
Yeah. Hell
give
yeah.
the opponent slightly a better opportunity to react and to prepare a bit more. reducing damage in of itself does not do that much probably with the like timing of it, but reducing timing does not do that much with how strong ghouls are after the timing, right? So that's like the two things we're trying to target. I've seen other suggestions regarding this like area. I know Loliet had like one thing where he mentioned you could increase HP by 10, reduce damage by 1. There's a lot of things you can try to think of here, but my general point is that you can disagree with these two things, but you need to target ghoul and ghoul friends at some point.
100%. And just attack rate is not enough. By no means. It has to do, like, something has to be done with the timing, that's for sure. Whether that's cost or research time or whatever. You sure you don't want to touch movement speed?
Also a question, yeah. That's people also said, but that's like the thing, right? Let's say you introduce like a nerf range and say like 4 different things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
yeah, for sure.
80% attack movement speed increase is pretty insane, right? It's they are very, very fast.
Yeah.
Movement speed is of course like it changes a lot of things. It changes your weight ability to creep around the map. It changes how much you're able to pull away from the battle. So it's movement speed might like also be a super impactful change if the opponent theoretically has enough firepower to kill the ghoul, right?
Yeah.
In the cases they don't, it kind of doesn't change that much. So it depends like a bit on how much it affects, but yeah, that's also a thing you can do. Yeah. I know that Remo suggested 80 seconds on his suggestions, but he also said that the research time was 60 to begin with, so I think maybe it's a bit like, it depends on what you think the base, or what the base stat value is there.
I guess your increase is kind of in line then.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people would suggest that 15 seconds is not also that meaningful, so this has to be tested, and I think like Ghoul Frenzy Push needs some addressing.
Yeah, 100%.
And my idea there is like, let's hope there's new patches going forward. If reducing ghoul power makes stuff difficult for Undead overall, then let's try to buff other stuff so we don't always have to do frenzy push timing every day, right? So, yeah. I think it's time, folks.
Absolutely is. 7 years of ghoul pushes is enough.
Yeah, and then next one. This is a bit of like we got feedback from both sides. Some people like it, some people think it's not needed. The idea here is to make Crypt Fiend's web a bit cheaper, make fiends a bit more usable, a bit more vulnerable to like being stuck, resource stuck for getting anti-air. That's like their main benefit, except being a range unit, is the fact that they also can be an anti-air unit. Maybe makes like the opportunity cost of going to fiends instead of gargoyles slightly different, because that's like been a thing now. Undeads never go fiends against there; they always go gargs. Yeah, and maybe just not like it's also reduction to keep a good upgrade like capped in cost. So yeah. Well, we make ghouls weaker. Maybe it's fair to make fiends slightly stronger indirectly. Yep. Now, this is the one I struggle with, Neo, regarding master training time.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because I mean, we, and the feedback we gotten from human players overall is that, and I actually think this is a bit undercommunicated, how insanely good Banshees are.
Yeah.
It might be a misconception here, because the fact that sometimes you don't see things as much as you used to means that it isn't strong. I think that has more to do with the game flow. The fact that a lot of human undead games are decided before that, or by mass tanks, for instance, makes that you don't see them as much. You don't have that many like you had before. We had late game elf armies with mass bears. Then you went banshees as a counter. You don't. Same with orcs, because you do like that ghoul frenzy push. You don't go into that super late game. You just keep pushing with that mass ghoul destro army. And mass wyverns, of course, is a bit of a different like thing. But banshees are arguably the strongest caster in the game, would be my interpretation of them, at least. And they have this weird thing now where anti-magic shell is theoretically not that strong if you have a lot of dispel that are easy to get to and won't get nuked by the human undead army. If you don't have that, anti-magic shell has never been stronger. And it has the two other super strong spells, Curse and Possession. And Possession, as you said, is basically a charm, Dark Ranger charm for a unit. So if we're going to do the other changes here, we're reducing ghouls, we're reducing knights and tanks to keep like that, try to fix that matchup a bit. We can't also keep banshees at the exact same power level as they have. It's also a problem currently, and that banshees the lack of banshees in Undead Mirror destroy Undead Mirror a bit. A lot of 100% complain about. So yeah.
Or like every time this comes up, I mention it. Destroyers at one point couldn't dispel it, and that would help a lot as well. They saw it as a bug and fixed it, and that ruined Undead Mirror. But I can see that it's very unintuitive if the only thing you can't dispel with a destroyer is this anti-magic shell. So yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, that feels very gimmicky to me as well. I agree. So our suggestions is, let's see if we're going to reduce research time. I think we're going to do like another discussion on that, because maybe it's not good to do that overall for all casters. I think Banshee Anti-Magic Shell should not be as it is now, where you can dispel it, because it makes this weird Undead Mirror thing, is one thing. And I also think it's actually a straight buff in most useful situations. In most situations, you don't have access to enough dispel to dispel it anyways. So you basically only made it even stronger. You now block 420 magic damage. It is so insane when you really say that out loud.
Yeah, it is crazy.
So our suggestion is to make it back to how it used to be, undispellable, which of course is a thing of its own, but just reduce how much it can then block, basically. We wrote 250, maybe somewhere between 250 300. Let the people argue in the comments, I guess, about like the correct value is. But try to work with the values to find that working better. And also another change, which would be, I think, would be maybe ideal to start with, would be like this thing, but I don't think Blizzard ever does it. So it's like, I don't think it matters that we suggest it, but let's try. Improve the visibility of the possession animation. Like, maybe if we actually saw what was being possessed more easily, we wouldn't even need to try to nerf it. But now it remains super strong as an ability, both as like an ability of itself, but also because countermeasures are so difficult, because you don't know even what unit you're supposed to staff out at times. So that would be like a huge improvement without actually changing stats. It's not impossible to do. We've seen the Black Maker community make like IDs or have shown actual like prototypes on how this works in practice. But I'm not sure the current dev team are interested in updating animations and stuff. So it's a bit hard to know if this is possible.
Very doubtful.
And if you're not able to do anything with visibility, I think that the duration for how long it takes to possess should be slightly increased to compensate for the fact that it's very hard to see and do countermeasures. Possession is still super strong. It's still the reason why late game Undead Human is purely tanks in the top level. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely disagree with the master training buff. That seems very unlogical to me. Anti-magic would also be a buff most of the time, right? And then the only nerf that a very, very strong unit gets is a 0.5 duration on the spell. This doesn't go far enough for me.
I like what I'm hearing, Neo.
Also, Curse is insane.
Oh yeah, that's actually, I didn't wrote this down, and I have, if we didn't even have things we didn't add. I'm not going to write it like correctly, but just to note ourselves. Curse, this is just a note to myself for future, should not last 60 seconds on heroes.
Yo, that is pretty sick. Also, I don't know. For years I have this conspiracy theory that Curse is kind of broken, and you actually miss a lot more than you should.
We've gotten that feedback from a few players, and we did tests, and it does look like it works correctly, but we also have examples from games where it just looks like it misses like statistically impossibly many times in a row. So it is a bit weird. I agree.
I would probably attack Curse, especially if the change of Blizzard stays in that you can apply it on mechanical, which I don't know if that's healthy or not. Probably not. So yeah, I would definitely tackle that. And the Master Training Banshee, I'm very much against it. Anti-Magic Shell, I don't have a strong opinion on, but whatever gets rid of that damn Destroyer meta, I'm all for it. Human players could probably tell me more if that's unreasonable versus human. But apart from that, yeah, Banshees needs to be attacked alongside ghouls. That's a no-brainer for me.
Especially like in most situations, humans don't have priests against Undead now. So even that change would make it less powerful than it currently is. In most useful cases.
Especially if you weaken human a bit with Arcane Tower, Knights, etc. Going in tandem and weakening Banshees seems logical. Dondo taking notes. Stay tuned.
Yeah. Coordinate with my girlfriend.
Neil made a good point. Let's write this down.
A good point, but I also have to coordinate with my girlfriend because I'm leaving in like 25 minutes.
Oh dear.
Very quick after.
Look at this guy bragging about having a girlfriend and all.
I'm sorry. Reducing Boneyard Course for 25 gold and Frostworm Freezing Breath is just small changes to maybe make Frostworm slightly more accessible. I don't think they need that much more accessibility. They're used in a lot of team-based modes and stuff, so they're not like they're not used, and they are strong if you get them on the field. So I disagree with Remo's suggestion of like really reducing the build time, for instance. I don't think like making Frostworm tech changes super accessible is a good thing either. They are pretty strong when you get out of them, so yeah, get them out. Now this is the controversial big one. So I don't have a lot of time, so I just don't. Sorry, Undeads, don't kill me.
Freezing Breath?
No, the next one, Sacrificial Skull. Freezing Breath is from the PTR. Whatever, keep it. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Good work, Blizzard. This next one is the big one. We're trying to rack our brains on how we buff Undead Expo against Human, if you want to do that, without buffing it too much against Night Elf. Because if Undead would get easy Expo against Undead, it would, Undead would get experience against Night Elf, it would make that matchup even more Undead favored. So we have to find some balance point here. Our idea here is to not remove Sacrificial Skull ×2 from the shop, which a lot of Night Elves want to, but introduce some cooldown after use. This would also help target the Nerub Tower Rush. Because now you have to wait before you cast the next Sacrificial Skull. So yeah, this is a big change.
Ooh.
But I still think this wouldn't make like expoing against Elf impossible. It would raise the opportunity cost a bit. It's not like the most common strat in the meta anyways these days, so maybe it doesn't matter that much. I'm not sure if that is because it's very weak or because Happy just doesn't like to play that way. It becomes like a bit of a guessing game. Nerub Tower Rush is very powerful against certain heroes. Like in certain maps, if you try to go Warden and you get Tower Rushed, you can't win, I think. It's not very used, also because Warden is not used against Undead for that very reason, on top level. So yeah.
I really like the idea. Maybe 20 seconds is a bit excessive, but like this is just my gut feeling, right? This makes a lot of sense. 20 seconds is a long time, and that weakens the expansion quite a bit. But you also buffed it up top by like 5 seconds. So maybe that helps already. I would probably play around with the value a little bit, but I like the direction a ton.
Yeah. And I think, this doesn't matter against human, right? Because you don't dispel the sack skull when you're human.
Yeah.
So it's only targeted towards Night Elf. So it's a very focused change, hopefully.
Ooh.
Of course, those that like to throw down 2 skulls to creep that large player pool does lose that opportunity. But yes, we agree with the removing heal scroll from Tower Relics, because it's not that. I think even like actually Undead buying it from shop is not that common, except like some situations, for instance, super late 100 food Garg death balls against Night Elf.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can just stack on like 4 or 5 heal scrolls is becomes too powerful. Situationally too powerful, not a very normal thing, but still. And it reduces the fight over shops, which is a huge part of Warcraft general, right? So, yeah. And last but least, the thing we just added here for discussion, but our feedback we got from one of negation so far has mostly been pretty negative. From, I would say, negative to extremely negative to maybe it doesn't matter as much as we think it will be. I haven't heard too many people love this idea. It's kind of hard to know what problem it fixes in the current meta.
It fixes the dependence of destroyers.
But you still want to go tier 3 for orb and stuff anyways. You're still going to go for destroyers at the same tempo, probably. And it makes Undead stronger in the one, maybe like universally weak point of the game they have. Which they kind of are not weak at anymore, is my idea. Is that, because it used to be the time where Undeads had to stay in their base, Fiends against Headhunter Farseer, couldn't move anywhere. Keeper patch, you couldn't move on the map because Keeper was so like it just removed everything. These days, I feel like most games I watch with Undead is that they have two heroes, one level 3, one level 1, run around and try to snipe either creeps or units from the opposition. It kind of doesn't feel like Undeads are like, oh no, we're getting so oppressed by the summons and stuff or spells in the tier 2 as they used to. That being said, if you don't introduce this item, you probably need to introduce something else. So please come up with something else then. I haven't.
It's not that easy as it is for permanent items, because there's a lot of permanent items that are not used that could be helpful. For consumables, very, very, very little aren't used or aren't super OP. I know you can play around with values, but yeah, that's rough. Like, coming up with new consumables is really rough if you don't want to do some engineering, which is, I think, what the team is at. So yeah, I'm on it. I played around with the idea of like vampiric potion, but then I imagined a happy lich with a vampiric potion, and I thought, oh my god, never ever even think about it. It would fit thematically, of course, but yeah, it's a bad idea. But I'm on it, and I really like the path to weaken the dependence on Destroyer Dispel. But I said this initially as well, maybe this is not the right way to implement. There is, for example, an item that dispels with a chain lightning instead of with an AoE. That could be interesting. I will dig into the editor and see. We could also play around with gold values, damage values, charge values, etc., etc. So there's room, and I will dig into that. You probably have to go.
I actually have to run, yeah. Sorry for that, guys. That's how the cookie crumbles. I knew this was risky. You can actually, if you want to, after take a look at things we didn't add to see like other things we had thought about.
Yes.
It's actually maybe interesting. And you have to then maybe deduce what the logic was behind them a bit yourself, but you'll find it.
Okay. Dude, I wish you a wonderful evening.
Yeah, I guess we'll publish this on Reddit and stuff so people can kill us, and then at some point, and then we'll also get more feedback from people going forward. Yeah,
I think we'll discuss things with SaveOrcas on Monday as well. So yeah, we're gonna have some thoughts over the weekend, but I let you go. You have to go now. I don't want an angry Dondo girlfriend, and you have to change. You have to change for the theater.
I know. Bye.
Bye. This Dondo guy. Fantastic. All right. Jesus. I gotta... I'll be right back, everybody. How long are we online? 3.5 hours? 4.5 hours. Oh, yay. It's a long time. Carson is coming up in 1.5 hours. Yeah, I wanted to talk about items a little bit. I think I did this before, but I'm not 100% sure. Campaign items. This is not ideal when it comes to formatting. But you'll get the idea. Oh, wait, we got some subs and donors as well. Thank you, R Hood, for the 35 month. King of Vale, thank you for the 11 month. Taker, thank you for the raid. Junior Tora, 1 year. Thank you. Tell me your go-to Five Guys order. I don't order food with burgers. You're never wrong with like mushroom on burgers kind of thing. Backseat Counselor, €5. Thank you very much for that. What do you guys think about buffing Orcs mana regen? I think this is a unique trope for the Orcish race, and I don't think we have to do this. So we have a weekly cup in 1.5 hours where you should sign up for. It's of course cup.backtowarcraft.com. It's at Warcraft 3 info on the right hand side. Starting at 7 p.m. And wait, I got a huge amount of notifications. All right. SaveOrcas wants to join. Yeah, let's go. One balance council member gone. The other balance council member in. SaveOrcas, my dude. What's up? I can't hear you, or you're really quiet. Oh my god, we see your face. Wait. Gotta do some production stuff here. I can't hear you, I think. Nope. Is that on me or is that on you? There we go. Yep. Now I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah. Good day, everyone.
There you go. Hello.
So Big Brain is gone, Dondolare is gone, but we can talk a little bit more if it's okay.
Yes, of course. We got 1.5 hours.
Sure. Well, lots of people want big changes or some substantial, interesting changes. We have a few ideas for that, and maybe we can share a little bit about that too. But regarding what you guys talked, one of the idea we discussed was how to make tier 3 more approachable. Because many players say, I don't go tier 3, it's not that valuable. It takes either too much resources or too much time. That's why we try to move Master's upgrade for all casters, reduced by 15 seconds. And it's not that much new, seriously, even for benches. You make tier 3 upgrade, you invest, right? And or talents, whatever. You have your production building, you occupy your production for 75 seconds. You're still not producing anything, right? And it goes into in the mid game when you have lots of tasks to do. You're not going to immediately hit that bottom research, that upgrade right away. Usually you can be delayed also, unlike in the early game, right? So I don't think these 15 seconds.
But oftentimes. We were worried about especially talents and banshees, and when you play especially these two units, you always have like double temple or double engine of wind, so you would be able to produce, just not as fast, but you would have the units on the field.
Well, tiny nudge to play talents. The walkers also get upgrade. Don't forget about that.
True.
Yeah. So what I want to talk about, Neo, is two things. Some words from map makers community. I hope Blizzard will watch till this moment and hear us. Or maybe you make a YouTube presentation. Add me to the full community balance discussion. Can you go to the document and open the?
Already on it. Yep. 1 sec. There you go. Got it.
Balance is important, but we have also a small community, and we made a list of things that could be changed. And you can see the long list. I'm not gonna go over it. It will take us a lot of time.
Holy shit.
Certain bugs there, right? Portal bug. Some units are not teleported. So if you fix that, we can use portals for new maps. There is blizzard bug. There is gate bug. We can improve trees, tile sets. There is a problem with medium armor units. Gold drop for some units comes from campaign, and you have a unit that drops, a level 1 unit that drops like 30 gold. Sorry, can't use it. Unless we break melee condition, but we think it's a sacred condition, we don't want to break it, right? So help us not breaking it by fixing this if you have time. We have some ideas about new creeps. We have shadow melt problem for some creeps, possession problem. Sorry, we can't use creeps that have possession in the professional game. Reincarnation is a problem. Yeah. Going next, mercenary camps. We have the standard one. We have a few suggestions to fix Ashen Whale, Lorder Winter, and Sunken Ruin mercenary camps. Then they might be used in certain maps. And we have a list of abilities and units that could be slightly fixed to make them usable. Like we cannot use units that have sleep, right? And so on. So please look at that if you have time. Please, any fixes would be welcomed. Yeah. Okay, Neo.
I mean, they did a bit of that in the November patch, right? They addressed the assassin and some other stuff, the ice berserker things.
Yes, the movement speed and the frost armor, they helped us a lot. So again, we will ask for 2 more. If you have time, at least make 2 happen. So if you go up in the short list, the first 2 things on that list. Can we fix sleep? Because players refuse to play on maps where creeps are with sleep. You try to harass that camp, the unit sleeps your hero, it gets surrounded, good game, right? So please disable targeting heroes. Maybe make it like an ensnare, sort of ensnare idea for a unit. So reduce duration from 10 to 8 seconds, increase cooldown. Well, that's secondary. First thing, disable targeting heroes. And maybe decrease mana cost. So with that, we fix a few creeps and especially Dark Troll High Priest that we would love to use. Trolls are probably the mostly used creeps for map makers. And if so, please add Abolish Magic to the High Troll, Dark Troll High Priest. Yeah. And second thing, Shadow Melt. We have a certain family of creeps that use Shadow Melt, which is great. They're interesting. But maybe Bandit Lord and Enforcer, maybe we can remove Shadow Melt from them. Why? Because they are usually item bearers. They have a high level, and players need to see if the creep is there or it got sniped already. If they skirmish around the creep camp, they should see how much HP is left there. Should they go for it or not? So if we can fix those 2 creeps, that would be great. And also in that family, there are wizards. So Blood Wizard from the campaign doesn't sleep at night. We needed him to sleep at night. Otherwise, again, the camp is not standard, is not good. Yeah, that's all I have about map maker suggestions. Hello?
Yeah, that would be awesome. Like, I personally don't know if we need the melee map condition at all, or if it's time to let that go. We kind of see in FFA that it can lead to very interesting situations. But of course, we also want to keep integrity in mind, because the condition is there for a reason. So, like, the cheating scandals don't appear like they did in 2003 and 4. I wonder if you can just circumvent that with a checksum or something instead of the melee map condition, because it feels like the melee map condition keeps us in shackles.
Well, it's not for me to decide. I usually decided by
Just
we change the letter, and we play on Battle.net, right? So on Battle.net, we use melee maps, and same on Warcraft 3 Champions. And we have this rule, we follow it.
Okay.
Yes. Otherwise, again, it brings disorder. It's like us patching the game, right? Yeah.
I wouldn't be opposed to that, to be honest. But I know a lot of other people are.
Well, we have Blizzard. Let's hope they can do this job well.
I mean, that's why we're here. To help them with that.
To us. Yeah, even though we make jokes, we are joking, but we really hope we will be listened. Otherwise, what's the point of the stream?
That's right.
Second thing, we can talk about some ideas, what new things to introduce. So last year, we gave a few changes, and we can suggest more. But we need to see that they are implemented, or we need to have some community channel. Otherwise, what's the point of us creating things or coming up with ideas? For example, same as Priestess of the Moon. We wish we could change Searing Arrow to some other spell that would be more, make the hero less one-dimensional. And we can, if Blizzard gives a green call, we can organize a Hive Workshop competition. We can even put some prize money in that pool. There are people who can create that things.
We can steal from Dota. We can steal from, like, borrow, purchase, whatever you want to call it, from all the custom maps that are there. Yep.
Yeah, but we have a dead silence. We're just communicating one way, and hopefully they hear us in the parallel. If you go to new, let's go to new. Let's talk about that. It's a short thing, and the last short thing I'll talk about. So if you go to new,
I'm there.
Last year we talked about Creep Lord. If we can make the spike carapace to have some synergy with the Beatles, some players found this idea cool. So I'll reiterate it here. It would be nice if we can have this upgrade applied to Carrion Beetles, right? Remember you showed it last year?
Yep.
Yeah, we also showed the Banshee possession, remember?
It was... I don't know if I have the map, but it was basically like a line, like a tiny shackle.
I sent you a YouTube timestamp. Can you show it again? That video of us?
Yep.
And that YouTube video has a link to the map, I think, which has the code. If they want to take the code about Banshee possession, they can use it.
Okay, first we see spikes on beetles. I guess the armor value would have to be reduced, but yeah, it's like, okay, maybe you have to, right? See this animation between the target and the Banshee, and then boom, possession.
Yeah, so that would be a cool new thing to introduce.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I don't even know what's necessary on the engineering level for that, but if it's available in the map, they can copy paste. Let's go.
Sure, and we also had this. Remember for the shade? Maybe not everyone saw. we had the idea for the shade, similar one, a little bit later down the video. I don't think I saved it.
Oh, find it somewhere.
It's 38 minutes, 19 seconds. 38 minutes, 2 hours, 38 minutes, 15 seconds.
Gotcha. Yep. Makes the unit invisible but destroys the caster's body. If the unit attacks, uses an ability or casts a spell, it will become visible. Bunk. This would probably need an animation for the shade as well. Once it disappears.
Yeah, what was it called? Enshroud? It was
Yes. Yes, Enshroud.
Yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
that's something could be done. I mean, we suggest, what else? For example, if you go to new, there is another big talk. What can we do with the far side? And, well, we try to brainstorm. We don't have a good solution. Let's be fair. But at the same time, keeping it the same it is, and it's not that cool. So maybe giving it a little bit more DPS, the simplest thing, right? So the suggestion is maybe to add 10, 20, 30% attack speed per level. It will give some synergy with the lightning orb, right? The more in the late stage. And where it can be used against Demon Hunter, right? You have no mana, you go for far side, and you get a little bit more DPS. And if you go for tier 3, your lightning orb is powerful.
It's kind of like a berserk ability without the penalty of taking more damage.
Yeah. And it's quite unique because no passive ability has attack speed. Like Tinker has a movement speed passive ability. It has some uniqueness in it. So
Gotcha.
maybe something like that. For now, maybe in the future there'll be a better way to reward Farsight. I'm not saying it's the best change, but at least something, right?
Yeah, community, be creative.
And the last change I want to talk about is one other direction we can go to develop the game. It's controversial. As you know, I know a little bit about build orders, so we can try improve starting amount, something from the start we can change. And we need, as you said, very tiny changes. So the change we suggest, increase the lumber amount at start from 150 to 160. Plus 10 lumber for each race. So it should be done carefully. Anyway, at the start of the game, when you start the game, you build Alder, you queue some workers, maybe barracks. So you look at your resources only when you're running out of them and you need the next building, right, or something. So this won't be even noticed, but what it brings. So human can have 2 farm and 3 farm smooth build. Sometimes you play the human, you take your militia, you get 205 lumber, you want to attack, and no, you need more, right? Paladin rifles is 10 lumber away from being a smooth build. Just saying. And also with the 10 lumber, you can build an extra defensive arcane tower. Humans should be happy.
Do you know how much I hate Paladin Rifle? Do you know that I don't want any incentive to go for Paladin Rifle?
No. Let's say if you play it, it's smooth. We don't make it better.
I'm just joking.
Yeah. I know. You are in Dondo. You don't like Paladin rifles. You don't like necro vegans.
Hate it.
And more things.
Yeah.
Undead. So here, careful. We have to increase the cost of the crit by 10 lumber, which is fine because Acolyte makes it and comes back. No idle peasants. Why is that? Because you can make this ghoul pool build. You can send a ghoul pool early, and now with 10 more lumber, there could be some issues.
Aye.
So pretty much we take 10 lumber away, but we make tier 2 upgrade 10 lumber cheaper. So 10 lumber for Undead, and that makes DKCL Fast Fins build orders smooth, and tier 2 transition a bit smoother. So a good change as well.
Sweet. Yeah.
The best thing gets Orc. If you watch Fly streams, he sometimes plays which build order. He gets a Blade Master, Fast Grunt, and the Fast Shop. So the point is, he has 3 peons on gold mine for some time to make it happen. So he spends gold to enable Blade Master buying item and going with the first grunt right away to the map, which would be very nice for Blade Master openings for all of them. Otherwise, you have to creep the first camp, come back to the shop, buy an item, and then you move into the map. So with 10 lumber, this becomes not an issue. You have a smooth gold gathering with 4 peons. So again, or just get this nice build order for Blade Master, and we take this 10 lumber away with a tier 2 upgrade. I think it's fine. Sorry, I'm an Orc player. I think it's...
I think Blade Master is very... Like, it's a lot more exciting than the Farseer playstyle, so all power to the Blade Master.
Yeah, and finally Night Elves. Again, smooth build orders for them with 10 extra lumber. Things are great. I suggest we take that lumber with a tier 2 upgrade, but we make the Tree of Life 5 lumber cheaper. So what it accomplishes, they can go for the second Tree of Life, hot build, let's call it hot build, let's give credit to hot, as a first building. And why it makes sense, because what? You start with 160 lumber, you send 1 wisp to build the tree, and the other 4 gather lumber. And they gather 5 lumber after 8 or some little time, after some time, and then you get 180 exactly. And then you can build Tree on Life on time. If they have to make 1 more spin, you're late. You're like 7 or 8 seconds late with your Tavern Hero.
Yeah.
With this change, your Tavern Hero will be on time, and this build will have it will be much better to play.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I don't hate it. I mean, the early game is so boring most of the time, because you either, like, you've done it a million times, and the waiting time there is, of course, the worst. You're not doing anything, except you're happy, but not even he can do anything spectacular in the first 2 minutes of the game. So streamlining this and speed things up a little bit and make it less annoying is a very good approach. I like.
Yeah. We can talk about items if you want. I'm curious to hear your opinion.
Yeah, I didn't prepare this yet. I looked at the item table. I think I have to share my screen with you. Where can I do this? Here we go. So I wrote down all the items that are currently not used in Melee, but are in the campaign or just available. A lot of stuff is like useless. It's like +1 stat or just cosmetic or whatever. But I think there are some items that can definitely be used. For example, Arcanite Shield, reduce damage from range attacks. I mean, we live in range meta in Warcraft 3. Range is always great. Like, we rarely see any viable melee units except maybe ghouls and knights. But usually headhunters, rifles, whatever are superior. And this item reduces damage from range attacks by a certain %. And also the armor. This could be an interesting item. It's similar. It's a bit similar to rune bracers, just against range attacks.
Yeah, makes Ranged attacks. Okay.
So that could be something you could implement. What else? Did I highlight anything yet? No, not really. So there is Frostworm Skull Shield, which gives you a bit of armor and little bit of magic damage resistance. It's like mini rune bracers. That could be cool early on.
I agree.
Because that's like we only have it on rune braces, but it can be a very good item. I mean, a demon hunter kind of relies on it in current meta, so having more magic damage or spell mitigation could be really good. If it's not too much, of course, that could be nice. What else was there? Firehand gauntlets. Something like this, like you could just pair certain values. Firehand gauntlets gives you armor and attack speed, which might be an alternative to gauntlets. Not to gauntlets, to gloves of haste. Because gloves of haste are boring and bad. Like, I really want to replace it or add something to that drop table. That could be fun. There's some other stuff, but I guess I have to do more research. In general, I really like the drop table on level 3, 4, 5, 6. But I would like to see smaller versions of a Sobi Mask, of a Rune Bracers. Stuff like that could be relatively easy.
Well, regarding Gloves of Hate, let's do some math.
Yeah.
Right? So, you say you're in the mid-game. What's sort of the damage from a hero on average, approximately?
30? 30?
30?
I guess.
Okay. So, Claws of Attack gives you 5 plus 5.
Yeah.
Plus 5, let's make it out of 40. Let's make it a little bit more. You get some stats, you get some damage boost from, I don't know, something. What percentage is that? 5 out of 40?
Put me on the spot here with my math, eh? It's like 8% or something?
You divide 5 by 40, yes.
Yeah.
5 by 1/8, which is 12.5, right? And that's approximately what the gloves give. Gloves don't give 15%, they actually give you around 12%.
Yeah, but I think the issue is not the level 3 hero, the issue is level 1 and 2. Where gloves really suck in comparison to ring and claws.
Well, you have to have, right, the life is not, is like a box of chocolate, right? Sometimes you get not the best candy, right?
Yeah, but I think a ring is always good because you take less damage from creeps if you tank. And claws are really good because if you creep, you do more damage and then it's finished faster. And gloves are just less damage. It's just weaker than claws.
Well, which is fine. You got a slightly weaker item. It's not much worse. I mean, it's not. It may be better than. It might be on par with claws plus 4 that you like. I remember.
I love it.
Yes, but in the late stage, gloves overtake claws because claws give you a fixed damage. In the late game, gloves are much better.
Yeah, but if it's a late game usage, then the item should be introduced on a higher drop table.
Well, then we have nothing on level 2.
Yeah, that's exactly my goal. Like, I want to broaden up the early game drop tables because I think on level 1 you got 5 items, on level 2 you got 3 items, and then you get like 6, 7 different drops, and I think that's very healthy if you have a high variety of drops in a drop table.
Well, I can give you a point of view. You might disagree. First of all, notice how Blizzard made the items. They didn't mix too much. The only mixed items are Circlet, and maybe level 5, 5 plus 5, right?
Yeah.
2. You actually have an item like plus 6 Robe of Magi. And when it's strong, you have to make a decision on which hero to place. If you place on the wrong hero on a convenient, you don't use it. So they actually put everything into one box, right? You don't have armor and magic protection. You don't have attack speed and attack. They put everything into one, so you have to make a decision on which hero to place. And that's why level 1 mental, when it's on intelligence hero, it's almost like a level 2 item. Same for what's there? Gloves, what?
And slippers, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the problem.
Maybe it's actually good. You think it's a problem? I think it's good because you can make lots of mixed items, but they don't provide anything special. But if you have that plus 6 agility on Shadow Hunter or Blade Master, it's for your hero. Otherwise, you sell it.
Yeah, but that item is also later in the game. That's, I don't know, 7 minutes in the game or 6 minutes in the game on most maps. And in the early game, I think you want to be like, everybody should be very careful what you drop in the early game, because the earlier you find something, the more impact it has, obviously. But if someone finds 2 claws and the other finds 2 gloves, then that's just infinitely better.
Not infinitely. There is a margin, but how much it's acceptable. Look, claws were plus 6. Well, it's not a good argument, but is it acceptable or not?
Yeah, no. So, that's why I wanted it plus 4 again.
Well, community said it wanted plus 5.
Yeah, community. Look at the BattleNet thread. Look at Reddit. Do you really want to follow the community, or do you want to follow me?
Yeah, follow Neo. Yeah. Let's agree on this. Level 2 items could be expanded.
Yes, for sure. 100%.
For charged and for permanent. But I really don't want it to be something like vanilla. Let's mix something simple, right? So that should be thought carefully. But for the higher stat item, that new item, Archmage Ring. Sorry, I don't like it because it gives you. It's always a good item. It's always good for any hero. It gives you plus 3 stats. It's probably one of the best items, and you should have no brain to have it. You pick it up with any hero, you move on.
Yeah, I think it's very boring as well. But I like to see more variety. So I think implementing something is usually good when it's not breaking the game. So I don't mind. I think it's just a bit boring.
Yeah. With charged items, we could be much more creative. I don't know. We can have...
Yes.
Resurrect a unit or a small book of the dead. I don't know. Or there is so much there that could be done. And
yeah, I think I at one point wrote down spells that are not an item yet, but that's just hero spells, I guess. There is a lot, like, but then again, they have to introduce it, and I don't think charged item are really a problem at the moment. I think they're in a solid state.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, Watch Awards are obviously broken, but apart from that, I think they're fine. I think the real big problem is level 1 and level 2 permanent items.
Well, level 1 are they bad? You have 5. I mean, and there is quite a variety. Level 2, we have only 3.
Yeah. But I think it's not the amount that's a problem, but it's what they do and the RNG. Like, there's such a huge difference between finding your main stat and not finding your main stat. And I think that is a problem. I do like a bit of RNG, but I feel like main stat is a very strong thing to find this early on. Or a super weak one. Especially with slippers.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that, like, HP always helps you. Mana, 80% of the time helps you. But armor, especially with slippers, like, does it really do anything? Does the attack speed do much? I don't know.
Hard to say. We should ask players maybe what could be. I see what you're saying, but I think some players overreacting when they are finding.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I definitely agree that players do overreact at times, and I think certain players still don't value a Ring of Protection, for example. But I don't really like, for example, an Archmage finds Claws and Mantle. That's so strong compared to finding gloves and slippers. Like, I don't want to change how strong something can be. I just want to lift how weak something can be. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think it does.
Well, I don't know. Some people suggested. I don't know what was the suggestion. Wait. No, 2-1 is not good. There was something a suggestion plus. I forgot something. You get point, but it's not in your main. It's in your secondary.
Mm-hmm.
Like +2/+2 on your secondary attribute, something like this. So you don't get +2 attack. So I forgot. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
If you did
items. Yeah, some.
Oi, that would be quite a groundbreaking change. I see where they're coming from, but I don't think they will implement it. Like, I want to find a way to readjust the drop tables with the items we have in the editor without changing anything super drastic. Because let's be honest, they won't implement something that's not there at the moment.
True. There is one idea I can share. It's mine. Sorry, I don't wanna push it for it. But can you open the level 3 drop?
Where is that? Do we have a graphic for that?
You can Google for parry up and then go.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can search, not Google. Search is the right word.
Do we have that displayed somewhere? Item levels and where they drop. Is that updated? I'm not sure. Let's see. There we go.
So if you look at level 3 permanent, and we tested it, Ring +4 is on par with Talisman and with Parry Up. Slight differences, not that far away. Ring +4. And it was okay when it was there, let's say, in terms of balance, right? But one thing that I want to tell you, on level 3, you have Talisman of Evasion, you have Parry Up, you have Ring of Protection, and you have a Ring of Regeneration. You have 4 items that pretty much achieve the same thing, right?
Yep.
They are defensive items.
Yep.
Why do we need that many?
Because defensive stats are not that impactful as offensive stats, and so it breaks the game less if you find them. I think that's the reason why. But then, of course, there's a big RNG involved if you get Claws +8. I definitely see that.
Possibly, yes. It's the best item in this level.
Yeah,
but look,
universally.
if you remove Ring of Protection +5, just imagine. you have only one ring of protection, which is on level 2, which is valued much more because there is only one item that gives you armor, right? Players won't sell it. And then you have Talisman of Evasion parry-up that also will be valued much more from level 3 because you don't have...
But I can see that there's a different use. For example, a parry-up is better against spells and a Ring of Protection is better against, let's say, a Blade Master.
But it's almost the same as Talisman of Evasion.
That's right. Yeah.
So let's say this way, it's counterintuitive, but removing, let's say, Ring of +5 would make other items more valuable and will make agility stats more valuable because agility gives you armor. So you create a lack of armor from items, well, slight lack of armor. And then you won't have any player saying, I have that many rings of protection in my inventory. You get it only from level 2.
Yeah, but you gain so little armor from agility.
Well, you get almost +1 armor from Slippers of Agility, and you start reading books that are dropped.
Nobody reads these books. That would mean, though, that you get only a ring +2 from the Boots of Kel'Thalas.
You get +2 armor from the Bolt of Kel'Thalas. Then the armor aura is much more valuable. Anything that gives armor is valuable from units. What? Or from other things. So you value armor much more now. And yeah, just saying. That could be an option. So sometimes removing an item could make things better. But again, Neo, if we add an item, it'd rather be in certain sense unique, not just a mix of things.
Yeah, as I say, I'm like, if I could create things from scratch, I would approach this very differently, but I'm using what's in the editor, and then a lot of stuff are paired with armor in the editor. It's like always, I give you 2 armor plus this and this. That's just what's available.
I don't know. Maybe we should brainstorm somehow.
We should. Yeah, that's definitely my task. You do all the build orders and the number crunching, and I look up some items that might be useful. Is there anything else you want to explain about, I don't know, the patch notes that you came up with?
Everything new. I think that's everything. So
all right.
Sorry for talking that much.
No worries, dude. You once again, like, I know this is a lot of work and you've been on this for weeks at least and you talk a lot. This is really helpful because nobody else does it. So this is outstanding work once again from you and Dondo, and it will be a great help going forward.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. See you sometime.
See you, mate. Bye. SaveOrcas, everybody, next to Dondo, the balance master of Warcraft 3. People should follow their lead for sure.